But it was really weird because we knew we needed to do it for the website.
Yeah.
But the magazine, the backlash was insane.
Really?
Anytime we put anything on Facebook or Instagram about e-bikes, it was just like, unsubscribe. You're dead to us.
Ollie, we're meant to be doing a quick ad. What are you doing, dude?
Well, I'm setting my fantasy team.
Oh, for Crankworx Cairns?
Yes. How did you know?
Mate, because it's coming up. It's this coming weekend.
Dude, and it's coming in hot, isn't it?
It is coming in hot.
We've actually got the first slopestyle of the year.
We have slopestyle boys are back on course. And
They
girls.
are indeed. And girls, of course.
And girls. And of course, Crankworx Cairns is May the 22nd to the 26th.
Is that May the 22nd,
Yep.
2-2, to May the 26th, 2-6?
Correct, that's it. And in between that, what is there?
The 23rd?
23. That's right.
The 24th.
So yes, of course, we've got the race companion fired back up. The servers are smoking right now.
They
so
are.
Big love to everyone for the support on the Fantasy League so far. It's killing it, and it's a bunch of fun. So why not head over, set yourself a team for the downhill. The rider registration list will be up, so you can have a little look through, see who's racing.
Dude, I find it strange that we're not 1-2. We're not 1-2.
What do you mean we're not? Oh, in the league.
I thought we knew the most.
We
I thought that's why we had the microphones, because we knew so much. No?
Turns out you can't even hack the system, mate.
Weird.
And of course, like you mentioned, mate, Slopestyle's back. Hyped for the first Slopestyle of the year.
I am.
It's going to go off. Will Emil be back?
What have they been practicing? They've had extra time. What's it going to look like this year? Slopestyle already looks like it's from another planet.
It does indeed. It does
This
indeed.
year, I'm sure, will be no exception.
So if you can't make it to the event, play fantasy. If you can make it to the event, tickets are on sale, crankworx.com.
Yeah.
It's not too late to get yourself a ticket. Maybe take a quick flight to Cairns.
Absolutely. And
Why
even
not?
even if you take the quick flight to Cairns, why not make your experience more exciting with the race companion?
Why not?
Pick a fantasy team.
Exactly.
Do it, dude.
I will do. And I will be doing, and I'm actually started doing it.
You're doing it now. I've already done
Yeah,
mine.
I'm ready to go. So, where is it? Theracecompanion.com.
There you go. Theracecompanion.com.
Now,
See you there.
back to the episode.
Welcome to the show. The man who's made me worried about my tick bite. Also someone who's probably ridden every part on everyone who's listening's bikes. Do you reckon that's accurate? I reckon it's probably accurate.
I think it's accurate.
There won't be a listener who has a bike that has nothing that you've ridden on.
I've probably ridden a lot of the bikes.
Yeah.
I think you have.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Rob Weaver.
Just to confirm, I'm not a bike thief. And I haven't been out.
The world's most prolific bike thief.
He's got
It sounded a little bit like that.
It's racked up.
So what you are is technical editor. Is that correct?
Do you want the official title?
I would love it. I was waiting for it.
Technical editor in chief.
Oh, he's added the chief.
He's added
I think
he's added
it's
the
just
chief.
as you basically don't leave, they have to add words
Give
and letters
things.
to things.
What's after chief?
Honestly, I don't know what's next. Probably just get fired, won't I? Let's be honest. It's always been a fine line.
What's after Chief? Brilliant.
So how long does it take to get to chief?
Well,
I need to not make this a joke. How long have you been technical editor at MUK?
So I started as technical editor probably 14 or 15 years ago.
Wow.
And then I've been tech ed in chief for the last, 10 years, I think. But then I was a freelance tester and writer before that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, fair old stint.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to learn how you got to that position. Like, it's a super fascinating job.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's changed so much over the years.
Yeah.
You know, when I got into it, you kind of just, all you did was focus on writing.
Right.
There was no other real outlet. You know, the web thing was kicking off. BikeRadar's been around since 2006 or 7.
Mm-hmm.
But the mags were always still kind of the focus for us. So
Right.
that's what, when you came in, that's what you did. And then if the website wanted it, you'd kind of just, transfer that work across, and it was just straight up easy.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's really diverse. We do everything from video podcasts, as well as, most of the stuff we focus on web first. And then the magazine is just it's a given that we have to make sure we're filling the pages, but it isn't necessarily the focus anymore. Which
Right.
is, it's good and bad, but it's just a shift in times, just the way things are.
Yeah.
And the magazine is still super important. And it was, I think I don't know, I suppose for me especially, and for a lot of people in the UK, it was like a really important stepping stone, a starting point. It was so prolific, sort of in the early 90s, mid 90s, it was the magazine that everyone read.
Yeah.
It started so many careers. I know like you guys have had quite a few people on the pod, and including Warner, who rode for the team. PT was on the team back in the day. So it's played a really significant role, and it's one of those reasons why we really want to keep, breathing life into it. But not just that, keeping the name alive through the video channels, through the podcast and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the website the website's insane. Like BikeRadar, because it's so broad, because we cover, road, gravel, mountain, everything. You're talking, 5-6 million a month impressions on the website, and then the YouTube channels, 750,000, I think, subscribers, and and we've got MBUK as part of that, and how that develops, we're not really sure, but that's only kind of a year in now. So yeah, it's still massive. It's just that the audience has shifted, and in terms of how they consume what we do.
Excuse my ignorance, but what's the layout of the company? Because I still get confused by this. So BikeRadar is an offshoot of MBUK. Like, how does it work?
No, not really. Like BikeRadar was always sort of. So when I started, we had cycling news, which was massive. So that was mainly focused around, at that point, pro cycling racing more than anything.
Yeah.
BikeRadar was like the focus was tech, and always sort of has been.
Right.
Then we had MUK, we had Pro Cycling Magazine, we had Walk Mountain Bike as well. And so now the way it works is that we've got Cycling Plus, sorry. So we've got Cycling Plus, which takes care of...
And these are all magazines?
So, yeah, that's magazine stuff.
Yeah.
So we currently have Cycling Plus, which is our road title, MUK, which is our mountain bike title, and BikeRadar, which is our web offering, which kind of covers everything.
Right.
And then the podcasts, so MBUK, BikeRadar, and we have the video channels as well, so BikeRadar and MBUK.
And they all fall under the Future Publishing?
No, so we got sold 10 years ago from Future, when they were having a few difficulties. Oh yeah, no stress. And we got bought by a company called Immediate. So Immediate owned Top Gear Magazine, Radio Times, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And then during COVID, I don't know whether it was to like protect the company a bit, but they kind of separated it out into 3 different strands.
Right.
And we were down as like a specialist group. Us, and we've got some craft titles, so knitting and cross stitch and bits and pieces like that. There's the history magazine, so BBC History and all of that sort of stuff. So we're based in Bristol, and since then we've had so 2 of the guys that were directors within the Immediate company then bought in shares within the specialist group because they could see the potential, and they've since then taken it over entirely. So we've separated out from Immediate. So we were part of this huge organization, but now we're very much a much smaller business with just a few hundred people based out of Bristol. I suppose we get a bit more autonomy, whereas before, if we needed development on the website, obviously the big hitters would always come first. If Radio Times needs something fixed, then Radio Times would get it fixed. Yeah. And we would kind of fall a bit behind in that. But BikeRadar's now gone to being one of the biggest sites within that company. Right. So it's kind of, we maybe don't have the big financial backing that we used to, but on the flip side, we can kind of do more things our own way, which is cool.
Okay. Interesting.
So before we talk about how you get to being in your role, Chief, what actually is your role? How would you summarize it?
Okay. So I suppose I kind of manage all the test content that comes out and look after anything bike or product related, anything remotely sort of technical. I try to oversee, or at least I make sure we got the right people in the right roles kind of doing that. We do a hell of a lot in terms of output, hundreds of bikes every year, like hundreds and hundreds of products every year. Yeah. So I can't be across everything, but I do stuff like making sure we've got a 12-month schedule for the road and mountain bikes. All the testing, so group tests, product tests, all the big bike tests, and all the smaller tests and the standalone stuff that goes into the magazines and onto the website. And then working with the video guys to do, tech checking on the scripts, because even if it's remotely technical, what they're doing, just making sure no one's putting their foot in the mouth and kind of, throwing a company under a bus unnecessarily or anything like that, just making sure we're kind of being fair and even and doing all those sorts of things. And then I make sure we're looking after the due diligence and the process behind testing, because
I was wondering actually,
yeah, I think that's something that maybe doesn't really get talked about a whole lot, but it's something that we agonize over, and just like the procedural part of it, which is super boring and really monotonous when you're actually doing it, but it's the stuff that's kind of how you get the results.
Okay,
that's what it's part of that process. It isn't just got another bike, go and razz it in the woods for a couple of days, just write something, whatever.
Okay.
There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah.
And as I was saying just before we kicked off, we've just finished Bike of the Year, which is it's an entire sort of, not company wide, but across the entire cycling portfolio. Massive piece of work, and there's a lot of people involved, and it consumes a hell of a lot of time.
Does it? Yeah.
It's massive,
right?
Absolutely massive. We're on the mountain bike side, we're doing the equivalent of 8 bike tests which goes into one magazine.
Right.
So it's a hell of a lot of content that we're kind of condensing down and putting out at once.
And does that usually, obviously it gets more attention than a normal episode mag would?
Yeah.
Okay. So would you actually see the numbers of the mag increase? Do you sort of like?
I think because it's not necessarily just mag focused anymore.
Yeah.
So you did used to see like that bump on the newsstand.
Right.
And maybe in Cycling Plus, we still potentially do, just because the audience is maybe more mature, a little bit older, so print's still maybe more important, possibly to them.
Yeah.
But for us, the big focus video and web, where we do see an uptick for sure. We're trying to put the latest and greatest bikes up against one another to answer. Ultimately, we're just trying to answer readers' questions.
Okay.
They've got X amount of money. What bike did they go and buy? And that's the sole really that is our focus, is trying to educate and make sure people can go out and, buying bikes is really fucking expensive.
Yeah, it is.
Sorry to swear. Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah,
You're
of
allowed
course.
to swear.
So, it's seriously expensive, and you see how expensive they are now. It's so much money.
Yeah.
It's such a big investment. And I kind of just hope that people still value what we do and see the importance that we're able to be as objective as possible. We have no affiliations with these brands. There isn't, no matter what the forums say, there's no brown envelopes coming through. They only need to look at the state of my car to realise there are no backhanders.
That purple Lambo, it looked all right. I thought it looked all right.
I got the helicopter. I flew it. Come on. So yeah, and we really hope that we can be beneficial to those guys who, before they put their hard-earned cash down, they can read what we think about those bikes and make a more informed decision.
Okay. So earlier you said you like decide who's a good person for each test. Who is a good person for each test? Like, what things are you looking out for in terms of someone who's going to test a product?
I think everyone naturally has a type of riding they sort of gravitate towards. We're really lucky on the mountain bike side. There's 4 of us. Everyone rides to a really high level. 3 of us have ridden and raced like World Cup stuff. So there's a decent sort of caliber. And on the road, we've had loads of guys that have competed at a high level, and they've either competed at a high level or they have so much experience and knowledge around the industry. They know every single bike inside out. They could tell you gear ratios from like 30 years ago on whoever's bike it might have been. So it kind of depends how it fits. Everyone's fairly broad in what they can do, I think. And then it's really important to make sure, if you're putting someone on a downhill bike, for example, they can. The downhill bikes are so good now. It's kind of maybe not the best example because you can't maybe push them to the limit like you could back in the day, but they can still kind of get close. And then it's also about, you know, if you're riding like a 500-pound bike, making sure you're just remembering who it's aimed at.
Yeah.
You know, and that if you know, jumping off a 10-foot drop and landing to flat and then everything folds apart, you're like, you know, it's not designed for that. So it's just trying to make sure you're getting the context right.
Yeah.
That's the big focus, I think.
Okay. Competence is mega important, clearly, to you.
I mean, I really value it in terms of like the team that we have and the level of expertise, I think is really important.
Yeah.
And I think in the UK especially, we're super lucky. I would say on the whole, the industry or like my part of the industry, the professionalism has crept up over the years for sure. Like back in the day, I'd have gone on some launches and you'll have people, maybe some European journalists from back in the day, they would like literally carry bikes down sections.
Yeah, I didn't want to.
But then still have a really strong opinion. And then you can see the brand managers trying to really politely sort of placate and be like, oh, you know, that's really nice you feel that.
But I really think it's mega. The reason I asked it is because I think it's mega important. Like I love that I go riding with you and I can barely keep up. That's the aim because you go to like like some of the ones, I don't want to sort of throw anyone
no,
over,
of course
but
not.
like a low level of riding, I really struggle to understand how you can then knock a product or like really look at it objectively even, because
don't get me wrong, like some people won't be able to ride and keep up with you, but they'll still have a really good understanding and you know, they know what it's aimed at, who it's aimed at, and be able to evaluate it really thoroughly, and they can do a great job doing that. I think it's just in certain instances when you really need to push something as hard as you can to get every single ounce out of it. If you're unable to do that, and don't get me wrong, we can't all do that on all bikes and all products, but some people can, and it means then hopefully that trust is built. I hope so. No,
I agree. Similar, we had this conversation in the coffee shop before, and I also don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but I went on a press camp a while ago. This is before like we were doing the podcast properly, and I ended up starting a mini-series after it, because I just thought it was super interesting that I went on this camp, and it was, I think it was like the day after the real journalist had been and gone. I was like the second, you know what I mean? I was like the one, just come and do this for a bit. And yeah, there was someone on that who was reviewing a bike who we were waiting for at the bottom of every descent and was pushing up every climb. And like you said, like this person's going to have an opinion, and you just think, and then someone else is going to base their decision on buying a bike off an opinion that is pretty bullshit, really. Like, you know,
I suppose, yeah, you know? But there is, potentially, like I said, though, things have really elevated, and you go on press camps now, and it is like, okay,
people get it.
It's pretty spicy.
Yeah, I've always been stoked that that the UK has, like, that everyone that turns up is good, like, because I can speak in English, and then I've always got someone to like ride around with, whether it's Al or you or like
like, and especially, you know, that's the other thing. I think a lot of people will just assume that we're almost like territorial and enemies with the other mags and the other websites and stuff, but the reality is it's like when we used to travel loads more pre-COVID, those are your holiday buddies, you know. You go away like me and Muldoon, we'd sync up all our trips and make sure we're always on the same camps and share rooms and stuff, and you get on super well. So it's really cool. And like you said, being able to ride with those guys is so good because everyone's absolutely pinned. And that's what's nice. And when we do Bike of the Year, we all get together and do like a week-long shoot. And we're not always in the same place at the same time. So just being able to do that, because Al Evans is up in Scotland. He lives up in Peebles. So he has to slum it and come down south for a week. And to ride with him, you know, him, Luke, Tom, they're absolutely pinned and hilarious. So we have a wicked time. You know, I'm so lucky I work with some of the nicest people you could ever meet. And I always have. Yeah. So it's been really cool.
Dream job, would you describe it? Your dream job?
Absolutely. Yeah. Nice. I think as I've progressed, there's, you know, more meetings, more spreadsheets.
No doubt,
but I think the goal has always been trying to get on my bike. Anything to kind of prolong that time on the bike is basically what I've done my whole life.
Yeah.
You know, and when you hang out with friends the same age who have maybe done better at adulting, you're kind of like, oh, you know, I'm still just dicking around on bikes and stuff. But I've had a lot of fun, and I've done a lot of cool things. Been to a load of cool places. So yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it.
Rad.
I want to dig properly into the testing.
Mm-hmm.
But first, how did you get the skills to be a good bike tester? So let's go all the way back. What's your journey into this job? Because you mentioned World Cup racing. People might not know that about you.
Well, yeah,
really
I probably
cool.
shouldn't have said racing. I was like attending and
World Cups.
participating. Attendance. Yeah, just making other people feel better about themselves.
So yeah, how did you first find mountain biking, dude? Like,
so I guess so. My brother was into BMX,
right?
and I kind of liked the idea of it, but I love being in the woods, and I was like, you can't really ride those 20-inch bikes in the woods. So, yeah, any opportunity I had, I'd get stuck in and go at the woods. And where I grew up in Gloucestershire, so Stroud, there was like a quarry and some steep roll-ins, and you couldn't really dig too well there, but you could, scratch in tracks and stuff like that. And yeah, I kind of got into going up there when I was maybe like 9 or 10. Wow. And then I was listening to your the Pagey podcast, and he's saying about wheeling the lines in the road.
Yeah.
So we used to wheelie the garages at the end of the estate.
Oh, wow.
So it would be like, how many garages can you kind of wheelie?
I keep forgetting to do that. I want to go out and try and do 374 or something.
Yeah, if you do that,
I just want to go and try it. Like, it's so far. Yeah. Innit?
So yeah, we used to, so I would be down there, and then just on the same day, 2 other lads were down there. And then I started talking to them, and they were like, oh yeah, we're doing this race. And I was like, oh, I'm doing this race. And it was cross country. So, you were like talking early 90s.
Okay.
And it was weirdly, it was on the Fox Hill, the Fox Hill motocross track.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. So.
What, there's an XC race around that?
Yeah.
Oh God. That's so grim.
You come tanking down some of those hills on like this old, I was on this, as an Amel. Do you remember those? Like piece of shit. Like.
what was it called?
An Amel.
No.
So like super cheap, full, like must have weighed as much as this whole building.
Mate, I think I had an Amel.
And yeah, they were crap.
Yeah,
really awful bikes.
When I was like a kid,
barely a man
it was a
bike.
hand down.
But it's zero.
I think
It doesn't
super hand down.
even register.
I'm sure my dad found an Amel in a skip. It was like a green paint splattered effect thing. Anyway, yeah,
it's probably mine.
I've never thought of that.
But I just remember, we're on like the motocross, the start gate, and you kind of sprint off.
Oh my God.
And then they take you down some of those hills, and they've got those massive jumps down the hills. And I just remember seeing this kid in front of me just not slow up and just hit one of those like 6 foot booters.
Whoa.
That you'd hit on a motocross bike, and just send it, and then just watch him like nose time. His bike just folds in half, and it's on the floor. And you're like, oh God.
You ever seen that clip of that kid a few years ago go down Fox Hill? You see that over the bar?
I was honestly thinking, I swear, is it Fox Hill? It's the biggest on a push bike.
Yeah. So
that's a good clip. Put it in here.
Yeah, I wouldn't say like my cross country career started out too like it was suffering. I'm not big now. I was tiny, and it was one of those things where it's kind of like. So the guys I'd met wheelie in the garages. It turns out they went to a different school, but they lived 3 doors down from me.
Right.
And they're now some of my closest friends. We've
rad.
raced together forever. So we kind of did the cross country thing until people just got tired of it. But we would always be in the woods, like scratching in turns, sessioning jumps and stuff like that. And then when downhill became more of a thing, like a standalone thing, we went to our first race, I think, in either 96 or 97. Longmore.
There you go. My first race too, dude.
Yeah.
Mate, it's so weird how big the jump was then, because you would ride around on a cross-country bike, breaking everything, and nothing really fitted and nothing really worked. And then when something came out, the downhill bike, you're just like, oh. you know what I mean? It fit. There was nothing in between though.
Right.
And the jump's massive, isn't it? You go from
I see what you mean.
Vast.
air forks, those Marzocchis that would go in at the bottom, they're like top out machines.
Yeah. I think I had to like save all my Christmas money, and I bought some RSTs.
Nice.
Mozo Pro, so elastomer forks.
Yeah.
So when we go race in the winter, I had to persuade my mum to let me keep the bike in the house to warm the forks up, otherwise they wouldn't work. But then you put it on the car to drive out, and they basically freeze and stop working. Just like, shit.
Longmore was cold. I remember those races just being like frost. You're just in a field.
And then you go from like 0 to 200 beats per minute trying to sprint down some flat thing. And you're like, this feels a lot like cross country. And you're like, I know there's no one else around, but it kind of just reminds me of that cross country race that I stopped doing. But I'm still. I suppose it goes down a bit here. Oh, it's finished. Oh, right,
Dude.
Is that downhill?
Go there now. It seems so insane. We went there.
Yeah,
actually on a
we
ride.
did, yeah,
Like, you can't
we did.
even picture how there was a race there. Like it's mad. It really is just like dead flat with a tiny bit at the end.
Yeah. And then you'd kind of we did all like the Sam series and stuff.
Yeah.
And that was on the hardtail. So hardtail, suspension fork, V brakes. And you spend all your time worrying about your chain falling off.
Yeah.
This is what everyone's. Oh, it's the glory days. Yeah, maybe in terms of like when it was on TV and it was all fun. And if you're at like the factory level, I'm sure it was unreal.
Yeah.
But for us, like spending time after school trying to make chain devices in the DT workshop.
Yeah.
Just trying to keep your fucking chain. Oh my gosh.
It was such a thing, wasn't it?
Oh my God. It's like that was the pinnacle of technology at that point. Keeping your chain on.
Yeah. So we have thick, thin, we have clutch mechs.
Yeah.
Right.
And you don't even need a chain guide.
It's big news if someone's chain falls off.
True
Yeah.
that.
But whereas like it was just standard. Another person with their cranks stuck. Rolling down, going, no. And then their canty brakes with the Maguras like clogged up with mud.
Yeah.
Dragging their bike, just looking so sad. Just got
was
another
every
100 meters
time,
of
wasn't
flat
it?
trail to walk to get to the finish. But then the Dragons kicked off, and that was like, okay,
Yeah.
this
Right.
is.
Was Dragon then the first downhill series in the UK?
Well, no, because we had the Nationals.
Okay,
So like Paige was
Nationals,
saying, the Nationals were on TV, so it's
Yeah.
kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, like at
I
that
thought
point,
Sam's was a big deal. When I was younger, Sam's was the next step up from the
Oh,
races
for
I
sure.
did. And then
Yeah.
it kind of went like...
But it was cool because it was proper feeder series then. You
Yeah.
had to be
Yeah.
ranked. You had to be ranked in your region to go and compete at a national.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is something I think Cy Payton brought back into the nationals.
Right.
So you had to be, I can't remember what it was, but you had to be ranked in your category and then you were allowed to compete in nationals. So we started, we managed to get some kind of deal with Giant. So we had bikes. The first, you remember like the ATX, not the 990s, but the 1, the 2. So we got deals and we had those bikes.
Is that the red, yellow and purpley one? With with the thin thing.
Yeah, so like Warner,
okay.
like Warner sort of signature bike almost. Yeah. So we got those bikes, and then we started doing nationals. So I was a junior then, and then went to doing the Dragons, which kind of ran at the same sort of time. But it was a crazy time. Like the national tracks were kind of just up from the Sams.
Right.
And then you go to the Dragon tracks, and it was just like, okay, this is why all the World Cup races are here, because it's fucking nuts.
Okay.
The first one we did is a place called Minas D, which is outside Abergavenny. And it was like, you spent, I think like the uplift alone was carnage, just because it was box fans just sliding off the side of these bio roads and everyone having to get out and push them back on. When you eventually got to the top, it was like a tunnel into the woods, and it was just straight in. You had like, I don't know, 10 feet drop in, and it was like slippery, wet routes with a 90-degree turn. And there was just a pile of people there. You're like, oh my God, here we go.
So
and then
did that track, what were the tracks like that? You say a step up, what were they like? Steeper, longer? What was it that was?
Steeper, longer, just pure natural. So
Yeah.
it was like, I think it would have been Jason Carpenter and Jonesy, so Steve Jones, were kind of scouting locations and digging these insane tracks. And that one in particular, Minas D, the first one I went to, it was just ragged and raw. It was more like riding in the Alps, the Austrian Alps or something. It was long, it was tough. You're on...
Not too bike parky, I guess.
Not bike parky at all. It was like as rough cut as it comes. Just they would never. They weren't cutting routes out. They weren't building berms. It was kind of just getting down. And I just remember there's a section right towards the end, and it was almost like a dried up waterfall. And up from there was this gnarly drop off this huge fallen tree, and I was just stood there. It was really muddy, and you'd kind of like paddled down to get to it and then fallen off the edge and just crippled yourself on the other side. And I just remember seeing Steve Pete on the GT full factory, just kind of cruising through. Then Pagey would have been on Kawasaki Intense, going through, and you were just like, oh, that's what I want to do. This is next level. So good. And that was the Dragon series, kind of summed up perfectly. All the tracks, they were different, but everything was just hard. Even when Jason would route something down a fire road, you'd be going so fast, and they'd put like a bus stop in, but it was all off camber, and it'd be pissing rain, and you'd go into it just sideways, going, "Oh my god, I'm gonna die," and then just cartwheeling into the track, and like there was nothing ever straightforward. There was always, it wasn't like one feature to think about on the track like it used to be at the Nationals. It used to be like, I just need to get to this, then I worry about that rock section or that big jump. Then you get through that one feature and you're kind of done. Whereas these tracks back then, it was like every few meters, oh my god, here's the routes, here's this.
Did you sort of, like, it's interesting to think, like my definition of downhill in my head is still kind of that, and I guess that's from racing or like riding back in those days. That's what like a downhill track looked like, I remember. But whereas now, how do you think it would have changed if you defined downhill now? Because I'd say it's pretty different.
True.
I guess at that point, like the Dragons, they had to sort of tidy things up a little bit, I think. So some of those tracks got a couple of sections sort of dug in a little bit to make it a bit more rideable.
Yeah.
Because the big thing you'd find is like practice was carnage, then racing was carnage. I remember, but then we went to like nationals in places like Llangollen.
Okay, yeah.
The first time we went there, I remember we were walking across the field to go up the track, and there were people packing up and going because they'd already been down it. Because it was so steep and so gnarly. And so it just shows like the nationals then took a leaf out of, the Dragons book, and everything stepped up there. And everyone was desperate, That's why I think the UK scene was so good. At that point, we had some of the toughest tracks. And then when the nationals started getting better in, like 2000, early 2000s and stuff, we'd have people coming from different countries to come and ride the national series because you had so many big hitters.
Yeah.
And you still had UCI points at some of them, or most of them, I think. So people were coming to get points and stuff. And that was when it was easier to qualify. So we could qualify to race World Cups if you got the points.
Yeah.
But if you've got the whole top 10 packed out with like regular World Cup top 20 riders,
oh mate,
it was super hard.
Yeah, and also, like, I guess it was so exciting because you couldn't see, like, to see Steve Pete ride back then. Like there was a video out once a year.
Yeah.
True.
You just had these magazines that were Bibles, like MBUK,
Dirt,
yeah. And then you can go to the actual race, and they are there, and you can see them race the same track that you're on. Like, it almost makes it feel like a bit more special than
100%.
Like meeting someone now who's at the top of their game at a bike park somehow feels more pedestrian than like
so true
than that.
I guess they're sort of almost held in high regard. Well,
because it's just harder to see it, like you say.
Yeah.
Like, I remember stuff like at races. I remember just being like, "Oh my god, they got a new set of gloves for their race run. This is insane." Do you know how much they cost? It's mad.
Some of the guys we'd be with, there was one lad when we were when I was a junior, and his dad, I don't know how he'd made the money. I think it was in oil. But his dad, so this would have been when the Animal Orange team was around.
Right.
So Minar was over here.
Yeah.
They had the huge bus. They had all of this stuff, and they looked slick.
Gilly, Ponting. I remember them turning up at races.
Yeah, and you see Tim Ponting and Gilly and stuff. You're like, oh my god, this is so cool. But this one lad that I was racing against, his dad had made millions, so he was like, I'm going to make them look like amateurs. Bought this massive bus. And he had, do you remember the Turner Burner DH bikes? Yeah. So he had one with mud tyres on, one with dry tyres on, in a massive garage in the back of the bus. Whoa. And there's me trying to warm my forks off. You're like, oh, gosh.
The dash. Yeah, exactly. Got your armpit around them.
Dad, take your coat off. So, yeah, I mean, it was nuts.
Is that the glory days? to you still?
It's just really fun memories, you know.
Okay.
And as we got a bit older, we were able to like get driver's licenses. And so then the three of us and my mates from lived down the road, Rob and Luke, we would chip in. We bought a van together.
Wow.
It's this old beaten up Transit, and we'd just travel everywhere. And we'd go all around, race. And we were lucky, you know. There was a bit of cash back then, so I used to get a bit of money to cover expenses and stuff as a junior. And then I rode as we were at like a satellite sort of Saracen team.
Okay.
When Saracen were really bad.
Yeah.
When the back ends of the bikes were like jigsaw puzzles, you could just bolt them together. They flexed so much, we used to just kill shocks. We used to twist so much. Like, oh God, my shock blowed again. So we rode, weirdly, yeah, actually I rode with, I used to race with Ethan Crake's dad, which ages me badly. He's older than me, but...
yeah, it still sucks when you have sentences like that, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, it's really shit. Yeah. So, yeah, it was cool. You know, you're kind of carefree and you just live from weekend to weekend. That's all you kind of did. And it was always just like pushing and pushing, trying to get to races. And Luke had qualified to race World Cups, I think in 03 or 04.
Okay.
So then we started going to races and it was just like, this is amazing.
Wow.
Being at the World Cup in the pits and you're there, like I would spanner for him.
Oh, right. Okay.
And that's how I started to get to know a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I need to go back a little bit. I'd met Steve Bear, who I think a lot of us can thank for help into the industry. So
Big time. First MUK article that I had, which was obviously back in the day, a big thing. That was Steve Bear's, not only photos, but like doing, you know, like he made it happen.
Yeah, so he's a real instigator, right? And, so when we rode for Saracen, part of the deal was we needed to shoot the catalogue.
Right.
And that was one of Steve's regular gigs. So I met Steve through doing that, which must have been in 2000 or 2001, I think. Mm. And then I was at uni and he'd call me up and like, oh, do you want to come on a bike test shoot? We'll pay you. I went, yeah, okay. So you know, skip uni, go on. Like, and around here, in fact. So we'd shoot loads of stuff. The bikes used to get delivered to Steve and then we'd kind of either ride out of his house or, you know, take the bike somewhere else, ride, get paid for a day, cover my shopping for another month. Sweet. So it's kind of through him. And then when I'd be at the races, Steve had put a good word in for me. And then Tim would be like, oh, do you want to, you know, back then the World Cups, you'd be there for over a week.
Right.
And Fort William used to have cross country as well. So when we'd have a down day, Tim would go, oh, do you want to go on a feature? You know, we'll pay you, you go and do this. And, all right, yeah, no problem. I'm only spannering, so it's no problem. So I did some like features in the early days for those guys, and that's how the connection with MBUK kind of happened.
Right.
But we racing wise, it was that sort of realization that the bike industry is really cool. It's full of really cool people, and when you're spannering at a really sort of pressurized event, you just go and ask people for stuff. You ask people for help, and I got friendly with Fabian Burrell's mechanic, Paul, and then PT's at the time.
Who's that? And
that would have been
Andy Kiffin.
No, it was just after Kiffin. Jacko.
Okay.
So I don't know if he's still on he worked for the Cannondale squad for quite a while.
Right.
So you just go and ask for help, and then Flukesy, RockShox, and those guys. So, and Luke was pretty good at killing bikes. So you were forever like twisting forks and stuff like that, and just rebuilding bits and pieces.
So I'm interested. Was your like interest in like product then built out of necessity, or was it something you were always into?
Okay.
Great question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I suppose, and I always got to the point where even when I started in the office, I was always like, I think I may be better suited to doing Dolly's job, which was like features editor.
Right.
Because maybe that's where my strengths lie. But as I go back and kind of look back at it, my fascination has always been with stuff like people like Nico and what he was doing and how he was doing it. And it wasn't until I started thinking the other day, in fact, I was like, I don't know if it was normal or not, but I'd go for a ride and I'd basically like work out all the things that I thought needed changing on my bike. And I'd come back and I'd write on a Post-it note and I'd stick it on my bike. And across the next week before I'd ride again, I'd try to take that time to either fix stuff, change stuff.
What's an example? What's
What we're talking here?
Well, everything from like, if you have a noise, You'd be like, right, I'm not going to ride my bike until that's fixed. Or if I think I could modify something in some way, whether it's like I want to change my bar width, I want to do this, I know someone's, you know, wiring their grips on. I know someone, you know, is modifying their saddles for when they're riding in the mud, and just trying all sorts of different stuff. And I had an orange for a bit. So after we rode for Saracen, I just bought, I think I used my first student loan and bought an orange 223 frame. And that you could slide the shock up and down and change, you know, BB height, head angle, all of those things.
You got into puzzling at this point.
Yeah, to the point where it's probably detrimental. I'd do it and I'd be like, is it better? I'm like riddled with anxiety and self-doubt. And so you're forever going, maybe it would be better if I changed that. And then you ride it and like, maybe I've just fucked myself. Maybe was it better? I don't know. But yeah, so I guess there's always been a fascination there. And I think there's also a realization that, you know, Luke and I did end up on a World Cup team. And I quickly learned that I'm not a good racer, fine in practice. I'm kind of like a domestique, I guess. You know, I'd be the one helping and being like, come on, let's try these lines, let's do this. I'll do that jump. And then as soon as the bleeps go, absolute melt. Spanning myself off the track. I just couldn't handle it. So I guess I was always looking for any kind of mechanical advantage.
Yeah.
If there's any way, and we had, so the team I rode for, we were really lucky. Dave Garland was the mechanic. So Dave had previously worked with like the Intense guys, so Kovarik and those guys at the time, and Warner, and spanning for some really big names. So God, I think he was just trying to get back into it. He'd taken a bit of time out, was building his business, but Dave loved racing. And the guys we were riding for managed to, you know, get him along on like a really sort of minimal deal.
Right.
And we were at a race in Germany. Do you remember Willingham? Yeah. So like,
I'm going there next week.
Are you?
Yeah,
for the bike
Winterberg
fest.
I'm going.
Winterberg, so just down the road. Yeah. So a really cool venue, really different. But for a World Cup, you know, it's like super flat, pedally.
BMX track, wasn't it? It was like...
Yeah, it was. And they were always doing work like last minute. And so some of the jumps were super soft. You had to pedal super hard. And Dave was like, these are the changes you're going to make in your bike. And some of the guys we were with were like, don't change anything. And I was like, you think it'd be better? And he's like, yeah, of course it will. I've just walked the track. I know it is. So he'd changed my bike. And I was like, fine, let's go for it. What have you done? And he'd tell me, like, brilliant. So that just started, you know, started the ball rolling in terms of, well, maybe I can get an advantage. Maybe I'm not as good as riding as my teammates, but hopefully this will help.
So you started gathering data.
To a degree. And then even little things like Dave was obsessed. You know, we had a deal with Michelin. So Dave would cut tires. Dave would go like, okay, we're at this track. Do you remember Vigo? So there were some really fast sections on Vigo that they wouldn't put on the videos because they're kind of boring.
Right.
But transitions between some of the technical ones where you just need to carry speed.
Yeah.
And those old Michelin Comp 16 tires were really slow. So he'd go, okay, well, I can make the 24 corner better by doing these cuts. And so you do these cuts on this tire and you're like, that's so cool.
I mean, it takes a certain person, I think, these things. And like at the minute, it's the most exciting. For me, I think downhill is so exciting. We've just had a podium made up of 4 lockout bikes where different methods of lockout, like data and technology in downhill is like...
so cool.
Yeah.
And it's so nice, to, you know, like all the coverage from this weekend, or the Fort William weekend just gone. It's that it feels like we're kind of coming back round to those factory setups where it's like, I don't want to go out and buy the bike Luke Bruni's riding because I can't ride like Luke Bruni.
Yeah.
I don't need to buy that. So it's great that they're doing stuff that's special, that's one-off, that's unique, that's making the racing more interesting as a fan. And that's what, you know, I've always been a fan of it. So just to see it and to see those changes happening, to see, you know, Canyon have got that prototype bike, which is clearly working, and they're using the flight attendant system. Olin's are obviously using something different that we're not allowed to know about. And Common Cell have something going on as well. Yeah. There's all these cool things that they're trying and doing that it was just like that at the end of the 90s. And, you know, this desperation to build these bikes that you could, you know, win on Sunday, sell on Monday.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily
I was going to say, do you think there was a lull? It seems to have got more technical
I'd
quite
say
recently
so.
again.
Yeah, I'd say there is. Yeah, whether
there's
it's...
a lull.
Yeah, whether there's... well, not necessarily with the racing,
Right.
but maybe things sort of just slowed up a little bit in terms of how much investment was going into the tech potentially.
Yeah.
And maybe enduro had a part to play in that regard, because a lot of, you know, the last sort of 10 years, a lot of focus went onto that, which is no bad thing.
No.
Maybe downhill bike sales were sort of almost seen as almost irrelevant, like a downhill rider
Yeah,
kind
to
of
a
sells
degree.
an enduro bike or sells
Yeah,
a
yeah.
brand.
Yeah.
Whereas, so as soon as the sales drop off, then you get these like crazy for race only bikes. Maybe. I don't know what
Well,
I'm
I
talking
think
about, but-
so. I was with a brand last week actually, and we were out on ride, and they currently don't have a team, but I think they see the importance in it. And this guy made a really good point, and he was like, Colin McRae could sell a Subaru Impreza, but Lewis Hamilton is selling Mercedes. He's selling the brand. He's not selling a specific model, and that's kind of how they're sort of seeing the downhill riders. They're selling the brand. It isn't.
Yeah.
People aren't going out and buying Santa Cruz V10s in their droves. You know,
Yeah.
there's hundreds of them, not thousands.
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
Whereas people have that strong brand association. They buy into, you know, the personalities, all the content around it, that lifestyle thing, the racing. And, you know, if Lewitt Bruni's bike came up for sale, they'd sell a few, but I'm sure they'd cost a pretty penny. And
It's really interesting to think
Yeah.
like about that, how brands have taken on like identity.
Yeah.
There's almost like the personalities that represent them, and you almost look at, you know, if there's a new sign and you're like, oh, I don't know if he quite fits with that brand. It's really cool how that's happened, right? Has it always been like that, or was it was just like a bit more clean cut? Not clean cut, but like less defined. Does that make sense?
I don't know, because I guess my perspective's changed as I've
Yeah.
come through the years.
Or like with
and-
print ads, did brands have a bit more personality and stuff? Do you know what I mean? To show,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
we're the fun one, or
certainly it was contained. Whereas now it's like you never really got to know any riders back when it was just magazines and one video a year.
True.
Well, that's the thing. But,
Yeah.
but then you got the snippets, right, from
Yeah.
Rankin's videos,
Yeah.
where you'd see like Palmer's parties, and that's kind of
Yeah.
how we perceived downhill back then.
Yeah.
There
And-
was like this mystery around people, wasn't there? There was
Yeah,
like
totally.
Sam Hill, for instance, before video parts and stuff. You just like
Yeah.
didn't know who this guy was, or like
Yeah.
obviously that's going pretty recent, but like
But then Nico especially.
yeah,
Nico, yeah, that's like,
completely no idea what the guy's
yeah,
like.
and
like,
he, you know, back when Steve was on GT and Nico would have been on Sun, I guess. You know,
like
Nico.
pick a side, wasn't it? It was like
Yeah, to a degree.
It
There
was,
was
it
that
was-
sort of
yeah,
like,
yeah.
who do you like? You know, Steve sort of, you know, Steve could race a shopping trolley, doesn't care. Whereas Nico was like, so over the years, so, you know, Martin and Anna,
Yeah.
the story about Nico finding out about dogging.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So, I was there, we were riding these prototype bikes, and Nico, we were going out for dinner and stuff, and Nico would sort of say like, he might have won more if he had tested less. Every run was like an experiment. Every run they were changing stuff, and everything from like spoke tension to, you know, he'd stick on flat pedals if he thought it was going to be advantageous. He would go to town. They were doing everything, and they weren't stressed because they didn't need to sell the bikes. It was like there was money
is that
coming
so?
in.
Yeah. It was-
And I think he was pumping in, I don't know how accurate this is, but I'd heard that he had a big deal with Nike, and he was putting the money back into the team to develop stuff. When we went down, so one of the first features I was commissioned to do was, so we got to a point where we were racing World Cups, and after that, I only did a year. I didn't qualify. I kind of sucked. And then I was like, the team I rode for was supposed to be helping with some of the money and stuff, and that never came to fruition. And I was like, okay, I've kind of given it a bit of a shot. It isn't going to work out, but I was doing more and more magazine stuff as a freelancer, and I flew down. The talk was we could race again the following year, but on the Sun bikes, because they were going to make a comeback.
the Radical Plus.
Yeah, and so I said, look, I'm not going to do that, but it could be a cool feature.
Right.
So Tim Manley commissioned me. I went down to Toulouse with some other riders, and we went and took out the bikes at the time, and yeah, it was cool to see kind of what they were doing, and that sort of like research. I rode Lords in the wet. That was awful. Genuinely one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. But yeah, I suppose that's long long way.
When
to
you
say,
say it was a feature, you've already got your, I guess, feature for who? For MB UK?
Yeah, for MB UK. So
Right.
we went down and we went and saw Olivier Bossard, and it went around the Boss factory at
Right,
the time, and
okay.
they weren't really doing a whole lot of mountain bike stuff then.
Right.
But you go into the warehouse, and it was kind of like it's like the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark. You go into this massive warehouse, and you're looking up, and there's like a world champion bike from every bike that he worked on.
Yeah.
Had a part to play in, so every suspension system he made,
pretty cool, isn't
just
it?
racked up, and we got these bikes down. Like, oh my god! Like sat on Nico's bike or Gracia's bike or Jeanier's bike or.
Whoa.
You want
It
them
was
to be special,
insane.
don't you? And they're like,
But even then, like the Sun Factory, it was really mad. So they went bankrupt, and I think it was partway through like finishing or not the factory, sorry, like their sort of building where they had marketing and then all the engineering department and stuff. So they basically like had a curtain across the stairwell, and they're like, yeah, you can't go upstairs. It's just like a mess. So as soon as the marketing guys went, before we saw the engineer guys, we all just like disappeared upstairs. And there's all the bits out in the trays from like every single fork and shock. You could piece everything together. It was all their spare parts. It was all these like carbon fairings from prototype bikes for Francois Gachet from back in the day. It was insane. There's also a hole in the roof, but yeah. It was so cool.
Really?
Yeah, and I guess like, yeah, that was when I was like, if I could do more stuff like this, I love it. I absolutely love it. And it was kind of...
What did you do at uni then?
so I did sports technology.
Okay.
So...
That's really relevant. Brilliant work
Yeah.
picking a
Oh, thank
subject.
you. Yeah. Well, it was early on I realised I wasn't going to make a living out of riding. So I made sure, even though like maths and physics were my weakest subjects when I did GCSEs, I was like, I'll do them at A-level, because I figured I wanted to go into R&D.
Yeah.
And I figured that would be kind of the course to go for.
Why do you think? What is it? Why do you think you didn't make it as a rider? In fact, wait 1 second. Let's find out after the ad break.
Ollie, mate, it's the ads. What are you doing?
Well, I didn't think I'd have to stop. It's so quiet.
I know you've been riding a lot and you're really trying to focus on recovery, but you can't always be recovering, can you?
I can if I sponsor this COMPEX and you got the Fix 2.0 and I'm making my legs feel better.
Oh, mate.
Honestly, this thing is incredible. It's been helping me out loads. I've been riding a lot, and this thing, I get home and I just use it for recovery. You can use it for before as well, though, right?
You can, mate. Yeah, the COMPEX Fix 2.0 Master helps warm up muscles before a workout.
Oh, nice.
And relieve stiffness after a hard session, okay?
That's what
That's
what
you're
using it for. Yeah, I've just
yeah.
finished a hard session, so.
Yeah, it has 5. Ollie.
Yeah.
It's my favourite tool as well, all right? The COMPEX Fix 2.0 massager helps warm up muscles before a workout and relieve stiffness after a hard session.
Yeah.
Okay, it's got 5 powerful intensity settings.
Oh, yeah, it has. That's done with this dial here.
That's done with a
it's
dial.
Really good, yeah.
Paired with a high stall force will give the intense pressure needed to help relieve the toughest spots safely and comfortably.
Hey, I want to point out that the stall force thing is really important, because when you're pushing down hard, really getting in those difficult points,
Nooks and crannies.
it's not stalling. And some of the other ones, I'll be honest,
Yeah.
not only did I buy them off Amazon, they stalled and then they set my house on fire.
Oh.
So you don't want that.
No, mate, you don't want that at all. It also comes with 5 interchangeable tips.
Yep.
Okay, and a rotating arm helps tailor your massage specific to the needs of different muscle groups. Okay. Yep. It has a removable and rechargeable batteries, a compact design, and a quiet motor help provide relief anywhere and everywhere. Okay, so you can bring your inner pro with the Fix 2.0 massage.
That rhymed.
gun. It did rhyme.
Just saying that rhymed.
It did rhyme. But yeah, honestly, dude, real life experiences. I use mine all the time. Post-ride, pre-ride. I just love using the COMPEX Fix 2.0.
Do you know what I found the other day? I was at my physio. Everything he had was COMPEX. I really liked that.
Mate,
It's really good.
Chosen by professionals.
Yeah.
And they do loads of other stuff too. So check out compex.com. All right. You can look through all of the different recovery tools. They've got
muscle stims. I've been using the muscle stims.
Yeah, they got the core
So
belt.
good.
They got this ankle protection. You need some of that.
Need it.
Wrist protection. Maybe need some of that.
I do now.
Yeah.
Oh.
Loads of stuff.
I'm going to get COMPEXed up, dude.
COMPEXed up.
Hey, do we have anything to offer to our companionship? Because I do like it when we finish ads on an offer.
Yeah, we got to finish on. Hey, it's a big offer too, mate.
Is it?
Yeah. So if you head to compex.com, enter the promo code The Ride Companion.
Okay.
What is it?
The Ride Companion.
All in caps.
Okay, nice. I was about to ask.
We're going to knock off a whopping 20% off.
20%?
20% off. Now, if that's not a deal to get you recovered, ready to ride through spring, then I don't know.
Hey, you
Can't
might
do any better.
You might get 20% off, but you're going to be 100% satisfied with the product, let me tell you.
Oh, and on that note,
that was nice.
Thank you, COMPEX.
Thanks, COMPEX.
Great break.
Brilliant. Now you're going to reveal why it was you felt you wouldn't make it as a rider. Because you sounded like you were pretty sure.
I love.
Yeah,
I hope that's not the question that we. And
No, I mean, I just wasn't really getting the results. I'd be okay, sort of doing all right, but it wasn't like I'd win every race or even be like on the podium every race. It was sort of really sporadic.
Okay.
So I knew that there was no chance of ever making a living out of it.
But you're fast.
Well, no, honestly, I'd be. The thing is, I compare myself to Luke, one of my closest mates, Luke, who, on a good day when we were racing World Cup stuff, he would be like in the 30s, and I couldn't qualify.
The thief of joy, the thief of joy.
And then
I know the feeling, dude.
But yeah, God, shit. Isn't it? But the thing is, so then, I guess I just was so naive. He would barely touch a bike. He'd ride like once a month, and I'd be like, well, if I ride twice a month, surely it'll be fine.
Yeah,
I'm doing twice as much as him. But the reality is, I need to work really hard. And I've come to realize that over the years, it's never going to be intelligence or physicality or anything like that, skills, whatever it is. If I want to be able to do something, I just have to work my ass off.
Right.
Which is what I did when I was a freelancer. When I kind of realized what I wanted to do, I'd say it's the one time that I've gone and just pursue something relentlessly.
Yeah. Quite funny to think that you thought, I can't make a living out of riding a bike, but yet here we are making a living out of riding a bike.
Very indirectly.
In a different way.
Yeah,
But
I guess.
Probably a better way in some ways.
Well, yeah, I mean, probably more longevity, I would hope. Touch wood.
Yeah.
And also maybe more something you're into. Like clearly you were already into plugging holes in your game through bike tech.
Yeah.
Like you were trying to find these next things.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
And
kind of seems like it suits your role pretty good.
well, yeah, I guess so. And just, I suppose the procedural side of it, when it comes to testing, it kind of falls into what, I mean, for better or worse, because I guess I am riddled with so much self-doubt. If I know I can kind of tick those boxes, you at least get to the end of that process. I still stress so much about putting a score on something and writing a verdict.
Right.
But you look back on your notes and you're like, okay, yeah, I've ridden it here. I've done these things. I've changed these settings. I know I need to be confident in what I've done.
Yeah.
And, like we do get, I especially, I suppose because I'm kind of overseeing it, I still get a lot of calls from brands that are really pissed off with reviews. Dealing with that, whether I've reviewed it or someone else, and it's being able to put the faith in the guys in the team and knowing that they're better than I am at doing it. And that's why we hire them. The idea is that you get better people around you to build something stronger. And I'm so fortunate that those guys are so solid that when stuff like that, when that happens, you go, okay, I know they've done their due diligence. They've kind of, left every, there's no stone unturned. Yeah. So we're confident in our outcome.
Let's dig into this a little bit then. Obviously we can go back and forth if we need to, but like, what's the process? Brand comes to you, let's say it's Focus, brand new bike. Mm-hmm. Here it is, MB UK team. What happens? How do you go about analysing it, putting together your review, and then publishing it? So let's go through that whole process.
Okay, if you want the whole thing, normally there's some kind of launch.
Yes.
So it's like a launch activity.
Which would be a press camp, a trip, something like that.
Yeah, riding through meadows, holding hands, like it'd be unreal.
Ticks everywhere.
Exactly.
He's already on there. I'm there as well.
Yeah.
We ride around. We do. Yeah.
And the brand is trying to.
They're trying to give you a good experience.
Good experience, yeah,
totally.
Yeah,
and they'll be smart about it, and if they know that there's any weaknesses, they'll try to steer you onto the better trails to suit whatever product that might be.
You're in the fast group. Let's be honest. You're in the fast.
Do you know what? Like, everyone's really fast now.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty pinned. And to be fair, I'm traveling loads less now, so I don't.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID, we were away all the time. It was kind of just the way everything operated. Now, things have changed a little bit for the better, I'd say.
Okay.
So yeah, normally you'd go on a press trip, and off the back of the press trip, at most you do a first ride review. But
Right.
you know, they're kind of just ride impressions, and you need to kind of factor in. You're riding on trails you don't know, on a bike you've never ridden.
And you've been presented what the brand wants
Yeah,
you to think about.
Yeah,
what kind
for
of
sure.
bike.
Yeah, for sure. And to a degree, you know, some of these are like proper whirlwind things. You might have like left your house at 3 a.m. and you're there having hardly slept, and you know you're already like in a presentation, then straight out on the trails, and then you're packing up and shipping out at the end of the day. So you can't. I don't think you can put too much weight in those things. But we will always do a news story off the back of it, so it isn't ever like a straight up press release. It is our take on what's been presented, and then yeah, the goal for us is to always get that bike or that product on our home trails.
Right.
Ideally, we'll have whatever it might be a few months in advance.
How far in advance are press camps normally for? Let's say there's a new bike coming out. Are you 6 months before?
No. So, for example, I've got one coming up at the end of the month.
Yeah.
And that is, so by the time I get back, there'll be less than a month till that goes live.
Oh wow.
But you know, sometimes like I've been on ones, say pre-Eurobike, when Eurobike used to be in September. I've been on one pre-Eurobike where the brand has just gone, actually, you know what? Because it's going to get lost in the news cycle at Eurobike. There's no embargo. And so for us, Google, you know, being top of Google counts, really makes a difference.
Yeah.
So then you finish your ride, you miss dinner, and you just work. You work through till it's uploaded at 2 a.m., whatever it is, and then get out of the door. You know, back in the day when that was becoming more important, the Google stuff, it got to a point where brands just never put embargoes on anything, and we'd fly, like we used to go to Specialized, used to do the huge camps with road and mountain, and then I think they'd basically like hire a resort for like 2 weeks. They'd have all their biggest dealers come over, and you'd be part of the first wave. And there was one time, I think, me and Warren, who heads up the road stuff, we flew in, and they present the entire range.
Okay.
We did all the presentations in the day, and then just wrote, went out, took all the photos, and then just wrote. And I think I was up for 36 hours. Just getting stuff done. And they're like, why aren't you coming on the ride? You're like, because we've got to do this.
Yeah.
It's changed a bit now. It's way better.
Right.
But there's not always a ton of time. But ideally, if you can get a product like 3 months in advance, you can get a decent handle on how it performs. We're never going to be able to comment on longevity over 18 months. We're never going to ride something for 18 months. Simply because, well, I mean, I guess we do with our long-term bikes. We'll switch like drivetrains over and stuff like that. But it's important to try and get those reviews out and get that buying advice out in a decent sort of amount of time.
Got you.
So it's really hard to say something after 2 years is going to still be working well, because we just can't do that. But yeah, a few months and we'll get a good handle on it. And then, so yeah, once the product's with us, the idea is that we try to back it.
Okay.
Because that's the easiest way to try and extract decent info. I think, I'm sure, you know, anyone who rides bikes and they change a product on their bike or they change their bike will adapt. And as soon as you adapt, you start kind of all that stuff that you're trying to retain just goes out the window.
Okay.
Any of that information. So the first few rides really, I think, are so valuable. You're not going to get everything out of it. You're not going to be able to take it to enough places or push it maybe as hard as it needs to be pushed to have like a final opinion. But being able to do it and ride with another bike or another product that's similar,
okay,
enables you to really get a good handle on it. And it's even better if you know that other product really well.
Okay.
Or if it's an updated version, you ride on the previous version.
Right.
And then you just keep as many of those, as many as the variables consistent as possible. So if you're testing wheels, you change tires, make sure the tires are the same, cassette's the same, everything's the same bike, all of those things, pressures, limiting variables, all of that. And then you basically have to just ride the same tracks.
Okay.
ride the same tracks. And, there's no reason why you can't go off and do other bits and pieces, but to make it efficient and to make it work, you kind of have to have a process in place, and all of us will probably have a slightly different process. But when we're doing Bike of the Year, for example, I'll go and do a few days in this one location, which I know is easy to repeat, has certain things that I'm looking for out of certain bikes.
Yeah.
Then I go to a different location, which offers something slightly different.
Okay.
And you kind of make your notes there, and you tend to end up making setup changes, and then you go to another place.
Do you literally make notes as well? Are you like a
making notes constantly.
writer?
Yeah,
Typer, phone thing?
I just have my phone.
Okay.
Especially like this winter, it's been so wet. So
you're not carrying paper around.
or like I don't know, my laptop's hanging, but you just try and keep it as simple as possible. So you're just getting notes, making notes, and just, I guess I'll also have initial setup, location, and then kind of what I'm feeling from that day, and then have the bikes that I'm riding. And then the other thing is you always trying to say it's enduro bikes. I don't really time stuff as much anymore, but I used to time quite a lot of stuff. And I'd take one bike that might felt, I don't know, it would beat you up, but you could ride fast, or you had a fast time. But you'd take that bike and you'd ride it at the start of the day one day, or on the next day you'd ride it at the end of the day to see how the effects it would have on your arms, your legs, if it would add fatigue, stuff like that. Because it might be that, in fact, the comfier bike that doesn't maybe feel as fast, but you can ride it faster at the end of a long day riding, which is what you'd have if you're racing enduro, right?
Yeah, it's interesting.
So if you've got a firm bike, I think that was the big thing when loads of downhill racers came into enduro, and they realised pretty quick, because the whole mentality about just muscling a downhill bike down the hill, and was just that's what we train for. It was 3-4 minutes of being really strong, and if you have to have a really firm setup to go fast, that's what you do.
Yeah.
Whereas enduros, you're trying to survive and eke out every bit of time you can. But if it's great if you win the first stage, but if you can't hold on by the time you're on stage 5 or 6, what's the point? So you have to bring in this sort of level of comfort, and that's a big thing that we've seen over the years, is the change in suspension tunes, how much better the tyre tech's got, all of those sorts of things, and it's certainly something that we look for.
Okay.
I mean, after riding so many bikes and so many components, how much can you predict what a bike's going to be like just from the spec list and geometry alone?
I guess to a degree I won't look. Well, you can't.
Not before you ride it?
It depends. Sometimes you have to have a good handle on it. If you're getting bikes in for a test with a price bracket, you kind of need to know what it costs and what's coming. But I won't necessarily spend too long going over something like a geometry chart, unless there's something. If I know that they haven't changed the geometry and I know I need a medium, I'll get a medium. If stuff is radically different and maybe I need to downsize or upsize, then I'll spend a bit longer looking. But I try to go into it with no real preconceptions.
Interesting.
Because that's the whole part of it, is just trying to be as open-minded as possible.
Yeah, there you go.
Because I think, you look at these things and they're amazing. They're beautiful bits of kit. And if you're a fan of you can be a fan of the brand, you can be into stuff, but you don't want to let any of those biases creep in.
Yeah.
You really have to try and be as open-minded as possible. So I think, sorry, I probably haven't really answered your question. But yeah, I guess to a degree, you could look at stuff and you could go, right, well, I know, they haven't updated that, and I know exactly how that drivetrain rides, or I know, I've seen that fork, and it's on that bike, and I know exactly the settings I'm going to need, and I know the volume spaces I'll need within that. But then you got to remember, with components especially, because the whole thing is one big cohesive machine, just because a fork behaves like that on one bike, if it's at a slightly different angle, like a different head angle, or you've got even stuff like different stem lengths, so you're going to weight it differently, different reach, you may need to change your fork settings just because of that.
No, it's really, actually not the answer I expected. I expected you to say, I get bike through, I look at the geometry chart, and I already know what it's going to... But that's actually not testing. That's, like you say, that's just being biased. And you're not an armchair bike designer. there's no point in having like this, like, well, you know, like a 65-degree head angle is really the absolute minimum of what I would really like. You have to try it to know, don't you? Because there's
and there's definitely like a window within stuff like angles and reaches and those measurements. There's definitely windows within how that will perform and how that will perform better or worse. So you kind of can, but you shouldn't, I suppose is what I'm trying to say. You kind of can, you make a judgment, but we really shouldn't be doing that. It kind of is down to time on the trail. And some brands will be pretty canny with how they spend their money as well. Yeah. And a lot of people, you know, there was definitely a trend back in, 10, 15 years ago. Brands would create that perceived value by sticking like an expensive rear derailleur on. Right. And be like, oh yeah, but it's got this. And you'd be like, okay, that's great, but I'm going to smash it off. So don't really care. Spend the money on better tyres, spend the money on better suspension. And we're kind of at that point now where the differences are smaller, where, on the geometry chart, like the bike test I've just done, because we measure everything, we don't just go by geometry charts. Okay. Because geometry charts are generally done off drawings. Yeah. And drawings are done by, Maxis give a measurement of a tyre. That might not be accurate in the real world
situation. It's the same with bike geometry, so you'll measure everything yourself.
And if they're welding a bike, there's always going to be a tolerance.
Yeah.
So we measure it all, and you're talking like we've got head angles that vary by 0.3 of a degree. Yeah. Reaches that vary by like a millimetre. So you're like, well, they're going to feel the same. But the reality is they don't.
No, and also you've got there are actually so many variables. Like I remember doing a frame and spec'd the head angle, and then the maker did the head angle with sag. Right. So then, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so like they did the correct head angle, but they did it once the fork was sitting in sag, because that was their view.
Like their dynamic. They want the dynamic geometry.
Yeah, but it was a hardtail, so then that meant So we had this sample, and we're like, why is it? It feels
different to what you kind of thought.
You know what I mean? And then you measure it and you're like, oh. And I imagine that happens over and over again, because within I can't remember who, there was a really good podcast about, like, design is one thing. I think it was Elon Musk. Okay. He was talking about
quite smart
art of design, but then also manufacture is so much of a skill and so difficult that it's like...
So you're saying like it's the hardest part.
Yeah.
Manufacture of it and keeping it consistent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we're talking about like literally a load of poles welded together, and it's still difficult. He's talking about electric cars.
Yeah, right. Yeah. True. So can there be different variables within a bike's model sometimes? Does that make sense? Like, could there be like a degree or a mil here or a mil there across a range of bikes that are all...
I don't. To be honest, we wouldn't have like a.
Actually, you wouldn't be able to measure
6 of the same models and be able to just go through.
You're right. There is, because
there's going to be a variation.
A tolerance, like on the drawing, even. So you spec even the tolerance on like frame drawing. Right. Or something. I remember people going to manufacturers, and before they got their race bikes, they would weigh them because of paint weight. So there would be like a discrepancy in weight between frames. That was actually Toby did that. Who's like a proper puzzler. Like he's so into it, wants the bike to be perfect.
Wow.
But there's I guess there's always like a massive difference.
Yeah. I was thinking before. So, how long have you been testing bikes?
I guess like including my freelance stuff, probably. What year is it now? 2024. 17 years.
17 years testing bikes. So if you took a photo, if you looked at a bike from 17 years ago to a bike that you're going to go out and test now, they're obviously drastically different. Yeah. So different. Have you noticed it, or is it just sort of incrementally kept changing?
Well, what's cool is you've got brands like, I suppose Monraker were one of the first. Yeah. But you have, and then obviously Chris Porter's Geometron brand. Like, those stood out, and that's why we're desperate to get on those bikes, because you were like, right, we want to ride the extremes. I was really lucky. So, going back, so like I said, I got to know Paul Walton, who was Fabian's mechanic, and then Stevie Bear introduced me to Fabian in maybe 2005, something like that, and I kind of just stayed in touch with him. And so when he was at Mondraker, and Cesar did the forward geometry stuff. I went out to Fenasosa Bike Park. Have you been there? Really
No,
cool.
no, I haven't actually. No.
Really cool place.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
And I rode the first, like it was a pretty rough and raw prototype forward geometry bike.
Okay.
So it was their trail bike. So it was 2 years before it came out.
So explain forward geometry. What's the overview?
So basically they were like, why do all the trail, like Cesar Rojo was like, why do all the trail bikes have 60, 70 mil stems? Let's just reduce the stem length, because originally it was 10 mil. They took it down to 10 mil and they put that extra length in the frame to increase the front center to make it a more stable bike. I think they maybe slackened the head angle a bit or kept it roughly the same, but the idea was increasing the front center, which is a super important measurement. Front and rear center is one of those things that people probably don't talk about or think about enough.
Okay.
Everyone's like angles, reach and all of that stuff, but it kind of, the rear and front center is what helps define where you're going to sit in the bike. So it's really important in terms of how you're weighting the wheels, which, you know, creating a balanced ride is key to making a bike feel comfy and stable and fast at speed.
So what you're saying is this bike is drastically different because it's longer and with a shorter stem. So there's two different characteristics that you'd be testing as opposed to everything else just changing by like a degree.
Yeah, and that's what it was. And obviously Chris really got behind it, and Chris is very vocal and really helped push things along. And Fabian, obviously, you know, he was right up there at the top in World Cup racing for a long, long time. And, you know, if you've kind of got his seal of approval, and he is, alongside Nico, as, you know, ultimate tinkerer, a guy who, you know, who can tell a single click of low speed compression on one run, you know, that's the level of detail you're dealing with. So when those guys are kind of backing something like that, you has to pique your interest. You have to go, okay, what's in it? Yeah. So I went and rode that, and then after that, the Geometron stuff. And so you could kind of see how far it could progress.
Right.
Whether it was too far.
Yeah.
What maybe needed to be
What were your initial impressions of riding that bike?
That bike, the 10 mil stem was pretty quirky.
Okay.
And it was like, in certain situations, like climbing and stuff, it would feel a little bit light and a little bit twitchy, but you could see the promise, you know, you could see the benefits. And then on the Geometron, which was another step, because that was a big bike, really big bike.
The early ones were mental, weren't they, as well?
Yeah, like
really as far as he could go.
Yeah, the smallest bike they did had a reach of 485 on the G16, which is massive.
Right.
When you think at the same time, I think I had a Yeti around then, an SB6, which had a reach of 425. So like huge discrepancy, massive. But it was that sort of like, well, this is what you could do, or you could kind of rein it in a bit, and maybe we'll just kind of get the best of both worlds. And it was sort of what they did. And you had brands like Specialized really scratching their heads and thinking, and, you know, they did all that work with the Stumpy Evo when they came out with that, and they had a bit more adjustment. It was slammed, it's super
kind
low
of modern
bottom
day enduro bike, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like what the start of.
Yeah.
So you're saying that was a reaction to these extreme.
I think so. Yeah, I think it was. I think they were certainly like at the forefront of what could be done, and yes, there were some quirks and things that maybe not everyone would be into, and it looked a bit different. It rode a bit different, but the reality was, you got a lot out of riding it downhill.
Okay.
And you were like, God, this feels safe. You know, it feels a safer place to be, safer bike to ride.
Yeah.
And you know, you think about all the stuff Chris did around fork offset. He was doing crazy stuff, you know, switching out upper fork, you know, CSUs for like the 26-inch version to get shorter offsets, because he could see the promise in that.
Okay.
And weirdly, actually, on a separate trip out to see Nico, we were in the back of his van, and he's got loads of different CSUs around, and he was already doing it too.
Oh, really?
But just not making any noise about it.
Okay.
It's just, you know, that dude is like, at the back of his van, he's there, he can like recharge shocks like with a nitrogen tank in there. You're like, oh my God. I did actually, on a ride with him, he was like, I'll ride my bike. And I was like, okay. And we were doing it for some photos, and he was coming into this, it's a really high speed, like rock garden, when you had to basically come in, jump and transfer line to line. Otherwise you kind of just hit this big rock on the way out. And it's pretty sketchy. He kind of did it. And you're like, okay, yeah, fine, sure. 10-time world champ. Of course, there's no problem. And then I go to do it, and the photographer's like, yeah, go, drop in. And going in, and I can just see this head like peeking out from behind the rock, and it's Nico. And I was like, dude, what are you doing? I'm out of control. I don't want to hit you. And he's like, I'm just looking to see how the bike's behaving as you go through the rocks. He wants to see exactly how the rear end from a certain angle. So it meant I was like brushing past his ear, and he wouldn't move, wouldn't flinch, just so he could see, exactly what the bike was doing, if it was deflecting or what. You're like, dude, that is like next level.
Yeah.
He's a dude.
That's
but it's
cool.
people like him, Fabian, Chris, all of those guys. And a lot of the big brands get loads of stick for being these big corporations just churning out bikes. But the reality is, yeah, sure, there's a few business people, well, there's, depending on the brand. People in suits who are keen to make money.
Yeah.
Fine. Everyone else is just super into it.
Right, yeah.
Or the engineers, everyone's in it for the same reason, just like us, just looking for excuses to ride bikes. And you meet those guys, they're so genuine, so desperate to just build better bikes. They're not there going, we just want to sell more bikes and make more money.
Yeah.
They're like, as long as I keep my job and I get to ride a bit and I get to make cool bikes, that's what I'm in it for. And that's what I think gets forgotten with all of this stuff. I'm sure, focus.
It's probably got forgotten over the last few years as
Yeah,
well. As
totally.
People just criticise
Yeah.
bike brands and,
But that's the thing. And there's that sort of like, the people that are so into it are the ones that drive that innovation. And that's where you see all those cool bikes coming out. And seeing what other brands are doing who are brave and going out there and kind of, just taking a risk. They're the ones that are like forging forwards, and the other ones are going, actually, yeah, there's something in there. Let's try something. It's really cool. Yeah. And that's where, so yeah, there was a progression, but there was also a big jump at that one point from where we were to kind of where we were going to go.
So there's like a massive leap, and then everyone else just sort
with
of
just
follows.
a few brands. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it was really cool. And then I'd get on a couple of newer bikes, and then I can't remember what it was, but I jumped on a bike that was maybe 2 years old. But at that point, at that sort of critical point where everything was going crazy, and then you're riding around going, oh my God, the bottom bracket's like 6 foot high. The front wheel feels like it's going to like fold behind me at any minute. And you just realize how good and safe the bikes are now.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I'm quite resistant to change. I am, and I think it's some dirt jump thing. I don't know. Just because dirt jump bikes just stay the same and it's still as good as it always was.
Right.
But that's not to say that everything else can't move on and really make a big difference. And I always feel resistant to like. It's funny. I don't know why I have that reaction, but I remember anyway. Yeah. Going from 27 to 29 and just being like, oh, they're making me ride 29. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, totally.
It was like that. It was like everyone's annoyed. They've got like a shed full of tyres now they can't use. It seems stupid now, but it was a mission.
But it's true though. At that point, especially in that, it's a fickle world, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it is that sort of like, okay, is it a trend?
Yeah, you just
is
feel
it going to stay?
Chump, don't you? You don't want to be led down some path.
Yeah,
that's
totally.
Like,
and at that point,
biking's less fun.
Yeah, and at that point, there was only like, when there was the big 29er thing, there was only a few bikes that were kind of doing it well.
Yeah. And there were no tyres. There were no good tyres. There were there was so many things that. But if I go now on my old bike, it feels insane. It feels like unsafe.
Ride this.
It's like riding a roller skate.
Which I never thought I'd say. I never thought
because at that point you felt safe. You could go super fast and
yeah.
It is interesting just to go back slightly, but like visiting Focus and seeing, like you say, the people are so energized by it, and they're puzzling, they're studying, they're changing things.
Like real bike riders.
That they are the people that make the brand what it is. You know what I mean?
But that's the same everywhere, right? That's the same. Like we get caught. MUK is the biggest selling magazine. Therefore, they're like, it must be a huge corporation behind it. No one cares. It's soulless. It's all of these things.
Yeah.
The reality is, it's a tiny team.
Yeah.
That are super into
love
it.
biking.
No one's going to be a millionaire. Guaranteed. No one's going to make a lot of money off the back of it. But everyone loves it.
Yeah.
And that's what's so nice about the entire industry. There's no bad people.
No.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, it's interesting hearing you. Yeah, that's really good. I'm still thinking about how it's interesting you talking about your no bias, and I'm imagining it as like blind testing obviously isn't possible because you would crash. But what you're trying to achieve
It's
is
been
essentially
suggested.
that.
Have you done anything where you've covered a bike up? Like if you, for example, took a range of bikes and just gaffer tape the logos up, for example, and just rode them and gone.
No, but we have got an idea. We are going to do something similar for a video.
Yeah.
For a different
Please be
reason.
blind riding.
but that's more around like wheel size, working out whether people can kind of work out what wheel size they're riding.
Okay.
Because there's
Mixer,
People-
opposite mixer.
I think there's so much, people will sort of go, well, I've heard such and such say this on the World Cup scene, and I know that I can't tip a 29er into a turn in the same way. Even if you're like, well, yeah, but your bike's a totally different shape and totally different travel and completely different intention.
Yeah.
So is that totally true? I'm not sure. So I think it is trying to go in and go, okay, will it work for me? Will it won't? Won't it?
Yeah.
And that's the other thing as well. We're lucky that the team, if we do really get stuck on something, if we are really unsure, we'll always get another one to ride it.
Okay.
To validate and not say anything, just be like, I'd be keen to get your opinion on this.
Yeah,
or
So
I'd be
that's
interested
part
to
of
hear
this
that.
testing process is like sort of...
Yeah. And we also then peer review everything, which is why it takes so long. So,
What does that mean? Sorry.
so we will look at, I will have, say, all of Alex's reviews,
Yeah.
and I will go through with a fine-tooth comb going, why have you said this?
Oh, wow.
I'm not sure that totally makes sense. Or, oh, okay, that's interesting you point that out. I felt the same when I rode that equivalent model last year or whatever.
Yeah.
And
What makes a good bike tester then?
I'd say someone that's really analytical, someone that kind of understands what they're feeling and can get that feeling across.
Can that be learned?
Yeah,
You think it can? Yeah.
yeah,
I'd love to get better at that.
yeah. I think
I don't feel anything.
I think the most important thing is just getting on a load of different stuff.
Yeah.
I think if you don't have that experience, that background, like I said, you just adapt. And if you don't adapt, if you try to avoid adapting, it's quicker to pick up on those changes.
Yeah.
So yeah, the guys that we've got are really methodical. It's just that sort of that process-driven thing. Everyone rides for fun as well.
And do you have? Sorry to keep interrupting.
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
but do you have like a set structure that you stick to? So it's like you all go through the same checklist almost, or does everyone do it a little bit different?
It'll be different from road to mountain.
Yeah.
Just because of the differences in general. I'd say.
So for you, like, what's your thing? You hop on a bike first time. What things do you go through, and what are you looking for on that first ride?
So first
Sorry
thing
if we've
is
covered this
no.
already.
First thing is always going to be setup and just going through and just kind of getting everything where I feel comfy with it being. That might mean getting the tape measure out and just kind of working out a couple of things here and there. Just trying to work through bits and pieces, like sag is obviously key. Getting that right is kind of critical to everything. Might have opened up the fork or shock to see what volume spaces come as stock. Some brands would tell you in advance, some brands would just send it and you just got to work it out.
Right.
And then it's kind of just that initial shakedown ride, and that will normally just be short laps back to the van, change this, change that, make a few notes.
Sorry to be annoying and make you go back again, but I think it's really good. I actually think it's a really good clip. You telling us how to set up a new bike. So let's say it's a car park setup. So it's like on site.
Yeah.
What is your checklist? Because I know it's going to be dialed.
So I guess fit my pedals, get the saddle height right. Then I'll sit on it and try and set sag first.
What's the sag you're going to go for?
Depends on the bike and depends what's recommended.
150
ballpark, I'd say like 30% at the rear on most bikes is generally okay. XC bikes might vary.
Yeah. How do you then balance the front?
So
Because
then
obviously sag's a bit harder on front.
Sure.
Isn't it?
So for me, I go by feel on a fork.
Yeah.
And try to create a balance front to rear. And sometimes that will mean having to then recheck, because once you've done the fork, you will then need to recheck sag at the back because it potentially could count your weight.
So what does that look like? Is that a bunny hop and you just
It's
see what it
literally
feels
rolling
like?
around the car park, bouncing around.
Okay.
Kind of getting feel for it. Move the O-ring, see where the O-ring's sitting.
Yeah.
And just kind, I suppose I take it for granted. I've done it for long enough, so I have a good sort of, I guess, gauge in my hands, and I'm like, okay, this is kind of there or thereabouts.
Yeah.
What I need. It's not always right. I had a few instances recently where it was fine on some tracks, but then you go and ride something steeper or push a bit harder, and there was a couple of particular bikes where I was having to really scratch my head and go, okay, well, it's a different damper, it's really good at these things, but when you really push it, you need to change it. And the only way I can do that is changing the spring, because the damper doesn't have much adjustment, therefore, so you need to kind of go back and...
It doesn't sound like a car park job. It does not sound like a car park job.
But you can get most bikes kind of there or thereabouts in the car park. So I'd say saddle height, sag at the rear is key. Then work on the fork through feel, or whether you're just going by, if it's like a 160 fork, I don't know, 15-20%.
Yep. So it then just feels like the bike's level.
Exactly. You want that sort of that dynamic feel to be fairly sort of even when you're pushing through it. You don't want it to be basically pitching back and forth.
Yeah. Then we got rebound. What are you doing with the rebound? Are you just trying to make it feel the same?
Yep. Again, it's kind of, I like having everything well matched and balanced. And it always is going to vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. And some brands will have really detailed guides in terms of how you set their suspension up. They'll have sag, they'll have clicker settings. Every fork will normally have some kind of pressure gauge, pressure chart on there, which they've got better and better over the years. I'd say those are normally pretty accurate, and they're a really good. Yeah. And normally, if you don't have that, you can go by body weight in kilos for the fork and body weight in pounds for the shock as a rough guide.
Oh, is that so? That's such
a
good
real
tip,
rough,
that is, dude.
The shock one, I'd say, is a real rough one,
Of
because
course.
depending on the leverage ratio and stuff, like, it can really change. But I would say, like, ballpark, if you've got nothing else to go by.
That's a nice starting point, though, for someone in the car park.
And then with the dials, and this is where people can kind of go down a rabbit hole and makes it really, really hard. I would say, if you're starting from scratch and you have a fork or a shock with a ton of adjustment, you do one thing at a time, only ever one thing at a time, so you can feel it. And I would say, like, on a fork, I'd go to the extremes. So go fully closed on the rebound, fully open on the rebound, work out what you like, whether it's either end or somewhere in the middle. Great. And then do the same with high speed, low speed, compression. Same with the shock. So that stuff's probably a bit more hands-on compared to like the standard step. But we're talking like, let's try and optimize. And I think that's the big thing, is like, if you drop 10 grand on a bike, that's a lot of money. And you've got these really complicated bits of kit bolted to it that you can make work incredibly well, or you can screw them up by not having, you see people riding around, like, worst cases, like when someone is riding a super cheap bike with the fork on backwards, right? Oh yeah. And it's terrifying. And you have to go tap them on the shoulder and go, can I please fix this so you don't die?
It's really difficult, because it is intimidating as well. And like, you
totally.
want your thing, you want the thing that you spent the money on to be right. So it's like, suspension is hard. I know it's your thing, right? Suspension is literally your thing.
Well, I like it. I think it's a really important part. It's where a huge amount of the cost goes, right? Yeah. There's so much R&D. There's so many cool things about it if you're kind of that way inclined. And I guess you just need to remember, like, a fork and shock is made to fit and work for a rider that's like, it could be, 6'7", could be 5'2". They could be 50 kilos, they could be 120 kilos. And you're talking like these tiny little, working parts within a fork that, not dissimilar to how a watch, what a watch looks like, how complicated and complex it is. You're like, they can't work it around those massive parameters. So I would say, anyone who's dropped that sort of money in a bike, go and see your local suspension tuner or your shop if they're handy, and get it done, for you, because you'll be able to eke out so much more performance. Speak to someone that knows. It's one of those things, like, anyone who plays golf or goes skiing gets instruction. And the basic stuff they do is they will check on the road, on the road as well. The big thing is fit, right?
Bike fit,
So for us as mountain bikers, we're just kind of like, I'll be all right.
Yeah, it's true.
Just jump on, fine. What could go wrong?
I guess the difficulty is that you can have like a base setting, but you do sort of tend to change. I appreciate it's an annoying question to ask you to set up a bike in a car park.
But it's fine. But
I think for people listening, it's actually really cool to hear from someone who's done it so many times. Like,
Yeah.
dude, you've done it so many times.
And we do have good videos on it on the BikeRadar
So do we.
There
YouTube
you go.
channel.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Where are we going?
Tire pressure.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. That was going to be, yeah.
Again, it's one of those things. It's the first thing that's in contact with the ground, right?
Mm.
So, in fact, maybe more important than sag, tire pressure. Get your tire pressure, or maybe equally as important.
Okay.
Get your tire pressure right. You can do that with a track pump, or you can do that with a pressure gauge.
What are we talking? Starting point, modern day, let's say enduro tyres.
Okay. I would go maybe. Okay. We're just assuming right
this
away
is
and
too
all of that
difficult.
stuff.
It can be really,
No,
really heavy, yeah.
I'd say like front tire anywhere from like 19 to 23. Rear tire anywhere from 20 to 25.
Okay.
Maybe. I mean, when I raced that Stone King rally a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think then I kind of started to panic partway through. And I jacked them up to like 28 and 30.
Okay.
Had no inserts.
Uh.
I was like, I don't need inserts, it'll be fine. And then you're like, oh my God, my tires are getting shredded.
Yeah.
Holy shit. But yeah, you know, that's really critical. And tires make such a massive difference.
Yeah.
Like next level difference. You can get cheap suspension, you can tune it up, but you can't really do a whole lot to your tires. You know, you can run the right pressures, but if you've got crappy compounds and
Yeah.
they're flimsy tires on. When bikes, when like brands punt out high end, super capable bikes, but you know the starting point is, I need to change my tires from
it's
day
annoying.
one. You're like, guys,
That is annoying.
yeah, and tires aren't cheap.
No, not at all. No.
I know we're still on the bike setup, but I find it really interesting. It's something I've only noticed when I was younger. I used to be like, Surrey Hills is mountain biking. That's how you do mountain biking. I go to these other places, but I need to make my bike so good for the Surrey Hills, like for 1 minute long tracks, and then you've got me going. Why do you need more than 180 as a rotor size?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
my brakes never fade. They never heat up. Of course they don't. I'm running 1 minute tracks, and there's an endless number of different things like that. Like, how much do you have to think outside of where you're riding when you're testing a bike?
Banger.
I guess the big thing is you vary the locations to try and
Okay.
compensate and try and kind of factor all that stuff in.
Yeah.
And again, it's always trying to remember at the heart of it who this bike is aimed at.
Mm.
So if it's a downhill bike, you need to go to ride downhill tracks. Like
Yeah.
our last downhill bike test was done in the Alps, because it's like, well, yeah, nothing's going to test them more thoroughly than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also when you factor in all the like day trips to like bike parks in this country and all like the accommodation and all that stuff, you can just drive to France.
Yeah.
It's actually not that bad.
Yeah, especially where you're based.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of weighing all those things up. Who it's aimed at, you know, what are they likely to do on it? You know, we had a big thing, like I said, with the tyres. If someone is saying that their bike is race ready and they kind of add some kind of flaccid, flimsy tyre on that you either burp or tear off in 3 turns, you're just like, well, it's not, is it?
Yeah.
And it's, you know, if that bike is $3,000, it's still a substantial amount to go and buy 2 new tyres.
Yeah.
Because they're still
Especially
consumables, right?
Yeah,
They're still
yeah.
going to
Yeah.
trash them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just trying to factor in all of those things and making sure you're doing appropriate riding and taking to appropriate locations for those things. You know, if you're on like a proper budget entry level bike, maybe the furthest you take it is like a graded trail center track
Yeah.
to get a taste of mountain biking. But then
Yeah,
you still need
totally.
to, you know, like you still need to factor in if someone's using the Cycle to Work scheme to buy a bike, chances are that's their only bike. So we need to look at stuff like, oh yeah, it has rack mounts. You can put a rack on it if you need to carry a bag to work, or it's got, you know, holes for mud guards, stuff like that, because it's going to be doing double duty potentially. So it's trying to factor all those things in.
Would you rather be underbiked or overbiked? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
if
totally.
we're talking about our bubbles that we ride in, and then
Yeah,
we're riding
totally.
these bikes, like,
I mean, I guess I love what enduro is, in the sense that you're kind of winching up hills and then riding down pretty sketchy, full-on downhill tracks.
yeah,
And the enduro bikes are so good. Don't really, you know, it's the tires that really slow you down. It's not really having all that suspension. I think it's how much drag those big tires have versus, inefficiency through a suspension platform.
Yeah.
So I think it's like, as long as you can stomach that, I'd take a big 180 travel bike and cruise around rather than something in the middle.
180, would you? Yeah.
But I love
Big one.
riding like
Yeah.
the 120, like this sort of this. I hate to say it, like down country bikes.
Really, yeah.
But like those bikes are so good.
Yeah.
So I had one with 115 mil travel, and I stuck some Maxxis Forecaster tires. So they're like a trail tire, but they're more like a mud tire. So sort of square knobbles, 40 mil stem. That thing was just so good. But you're banging off the bump stops, and when it goes wrong, like if you're offline or you're not precise, it's kind of sketchy. But it's so like next level fun.
Yeah.
And you feel like a hero.
I've been 160, 150 guy for a long time, and I've just got this VAM squared Focus, which is 140, 130, I believe.
Yeah.
I
I could be wrong. But I'm really excited actually about almost trying to underbike myself. Like
Yeah.
I feel like I now narrowed down that 160, 150 for where I live is pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm aware I step outside of it and I go and do like things that maybe it's not suited for, like Mexican races and all of those things. But
Sure.
But for the most part, I feel like that's pretty good around here.
For most riders, I think, especially in the UK, like those, there's bikes like, what's that common cell? There's a common cell bike with like 120 mil.
Yeah.
That thing is, I mean, Al reviewed it. I haven't touched it, but that thing was, he loved it.
Yeah.
It's one of the few bikes that's got 5 stars.
Really, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and there's probably, I could count the number of bikes in 20 years that have got a full score.
Wow.
So there's a few bikes that are just killer, transition spur, stuff like that. And Mick Kirkman, who tests for us, you know Mick? It's a killer photographer, great bike rider. He basically just lives on a 120 bike. Mick's a big dude riding full-on tracks.
Yeah.
Massive jumps. And he rips them.
So he wants to be underbiked.
Yeah, he'll just put big tires on and just go absolutely mental. It's like riding with him is nuts because he's got that old school BMX background.
Yeah.
Same as like Muldoon and Danny and all those guys. They just send it.
So
And it's so fun.
You've got 2 examples. You prefer over, he prefers under.
Well, I don't know if I prefer it. I think it's more like, I like the fact you can ride a big travel bike and it isn't a massive penalty to ride it anymore. It isn't like trying to cruise around on a downhill bike. If I was only going to have one bike and only ever ride in the UK, I'd get a short travel bike.
There you go.
Wow.
For sure, because it's just so fun. And you just put, you know, you get your suspension tuned, you put Burlier tires on it. If you were buying a frame, maybe you go slightly bigger fork, reduce flex, bits and pieces like that. Because, you know, like those, the lightweight Fox forks or lightweight RockShox forks or whoever they're from, they will, you know, twang around a little bit if you start pushing them. And you can ride those bikes on pretty gnarly tracks. And they're really fun. But it is like, just because you get to sort of tread that fine line that makes them so fun. But they're super capable. I mean, you do tend to end up with quite a lot of oil kicking around the back of the shock. But they're wicked fun.
Yeah.
What does a mountain bike, what defines mountain bikes now for you right now,
What
2024?
defines it?
Well, so if you're a kid and someone asks you to draw a car, you'd draw like, what you would actually draw would, I think most part would be like a saloon car. It'd be one that looks the same forwards, backwards. Like that simple, quick, just like knee-jerk reaction. Is mountain biking just a slopestyle? Is a slopestyle bike? What is a mountain bike?
I guess you'd end up drawing something similar to a trail bike, right? Full suspension, short stem, wide bars, knobbly tires, big discs, single chain ring.
We talked about that yesterday. It's like loads of places cross-country bike would be a mountain bike, but I'm with you. I think a trail bike just sits right in the middle, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Especially in this, like I think we've always had a bit of a bubble. You know, we were really quick. This country was a really sort of early adopter of single chain rings, probably because of all the issues we spoke about earlier. But that simplicity and I guess the things that it opens up the designers to be able to do. And I remember when Martin when he was working for Hotlines, he had a real hand when it came to how bikes were spec'd at Lapierre.
Right.
And he'd be like, the Zesty is the perfect, for example, the Zesty was it was like a 140 trail bike for the UK. He's like, but you can't spec it with a double ring.
Right.
You can't put a front mech on there.
Yeah.
You got to put a chain guide. You got to have a single ring. You got to put a dropper post on there. You can't put a long stem. Like
Right,
anything
yeah.
over 50 mils wrong.
Yeah.
You have to put burly tires on it. So they started bringing in this like one-off sort of spec bike
Like
into the
bike,
UK.
yeah.
Which is why like you have brands like Kotick and Burf and BTR and stuff like that. You know, those hardtails that maybe wouldn't have a place in a lot of countries because they
Yeah.
weigh a ton and they're ridiculously slack. And they're built around a longer travel fork and they have big tires and all of this stuff. But they exist here because we're just like, we don't want to keep trashing stuff. We want it to work, but we want to be able to get down gnarly tracks.
Yeah.
Because it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that mentality. I'll be honest. Obviously,
It's
I've
cool.
got association with DMR, and DMR's not like making for race only super
Of course,
light
yeah, like the
stuff.
trail, the original Trail Star. And
Yeah,
stuff
like
that.
I enjoy those like design philosophies. You know, where something's meant to like last.
Yeah.
It is super important. I'm guilty of like trying to move with the times and maybe trying to make stuff super light or like trying to spec smaller bolts. And it's really good working with Damo, really, because he'll just be like, no,
Ain't
we're
gonna
not
last.
doing that. That's M6. And you're like, come on, dude, don't make it M6. Like, this is heavy bike chat, by the way.
Super.
Yeah, yeah.
This is why mountain bike's not cool.
Yeah, we should be like, what can we talk about? But like, he's right. And there's something UK about it, like making something that actually like lasts and isn't
Yeah,
just
totally.
like,
But that's where you'll get people like invest in the brands, right?
yeah.
Totally.
And then back
And
to what
Kotick is a great example of that.
Kotick's a good
Yeah.
example. Geometron, you know,
Yeah.
right now they have one bike, but they have, you know, they've got a huge sort of following because they're not out to go, well, we're going to just kill this in the next 2-3 years. And, you know, model year 26 is going to be an entire completely different bike. You know, they'll make refinements, they'll change stuff, but it's all for the greater good. And it isn't just to try and extract more money out of people. It's that want as, you know, bike geeks and bike riders to make stuff better.
Yeah.
You
yeah.
know, Sam, who heads up that operation now, Jesus Christ, he can ride a bike.
Yeah.
Like that guy can move. Serious operator. And, you know, those guys, Raw, companies like that, that's where you see the smaller, more reactive companies doing cool stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it's amazing that they exist. And obviously we need to do everything we can to make sure they continue to exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because those are the guys that are going to help push everything else on, I think.
When did you first ride an e-bike?
Cool. It's a long time ago.
Really, yeah?
Yeah. It would have been one of the really early ones from Scott, I think.
Right.
Cube or Scott, maybe?
Okay.
I don't think I got on the early high bike stuff. But it was really weird because we knew we needed to do it for the website.
Yeah.
But the magazine, the backlash was insane.
Really?
Anytime we put anything on Facebook or Instagram about e-bikes, it was just like, unsubscribe. You're dead to us.
Mate, I had the weirdest, it's not even a weird experience, but on Sunday out riding, and just this, like, just noticed that every single person was on an e-bike, and everyone, now it's just like an accepted thing that it is.
100%.
Especially
Yeah.
where I live. It's a bit more fun, to be honest.
Yeah.
So,
And obviously there's a ton of kickback around legality in the US
of course,
and stuff.
yeah. But
and
it's just like all of the people as well that have just been, like you said, they're like, no, not doing it. No, what's up with pedaling? Blah, 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 blah. And I get it. I do. Sometimes I love going out on my regular bike.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
You know, really grinding and whatever. But like, it's just so interesting to see people now. It's like, actually, no, I get it. I really get it. It's super good.
And you know, obviously the brands are seeing a massive boost from selling them,
Yeah.
which is great.
Yeah.
And hopefully they'll continue to put money back into developing, because the first one I rode was like, it was a novelty. You know, it was like climbing was fun. You could do all sorts of shit like razzing around up the hills, but descending was kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
You know, the front end was so short, the back end was like measured with the calendar. You know, it's that, and it was really hard to ride in a controlled sort of way. And I remember I had a massive, I think it was like brambles snagged my front brake, and I flipped over the bars and it landed on me, and I was like, oh, this is shit.
It's like 45 people or something.
So after I got out from underneath it and made it home, and again, you just see that massive improvement in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
How the geometry's come on, how they've gone, okay, well, this is how the motor used to sit. Now the motor's more compact. We can change the angle of how it sits in the frame so we can make more room. There's so many cool things happening. And then obviously you have, like, you spoke about the lightweight one, right?
Yeah.
The other week.
Yeah.
That whole thing's blowing up now. And it's going to be, I don't know how it's going to finish. I don't know how it's going to end in terms of where we're going to get to, whether we're going to have two distinct categories forever or whether they're just going to keep getting better and better and then kind of meeting in the middle somewhere.
I feel like that's, I don't know. I had a conversation with someone years ago who said that. It was just like, there'll just be a point where bikes
converge.
are just e-bikes and there's just an option to just have it on or off and you don't even notice which one's which.
And then you see Martin May's race one.
Yeah, exactly.
Fort William.
That's wild.
It's a bizarre thought. I can't imagine at the minute the middle point. Like, I don't know. Just the talk is like the middle. I don't know what it looks like. There's still such a big difference between SL and a full fat e-bike for me.
Yeah, I think it's where brands are starting to use like customized full powered motors and lighter batteries is where that is starting to kind of merge a little bit potentially. You know, I think when the first SL bikes came out, they were genuinely like lightweight but really low powered in comparison to a full powered one.
I didn't want anything to do with the first ones just because it felt like a bad mountain bike. Whereas now it's reaching like a point where it's like it feels like a really good e-bike, and it's closer to, I don't know.
Yeah.
I really didn't want to like them. I don't want to like the expensive thing. I don't want to like the fancy thing, and it's tough.
But there's still, you know, I think it's great, and I think it's amazing what it's doing, and it opens it up to loads more people, and people that were maybe put off because they didn't want to ride up a massive hill to then ride down and go, that's all I'm going to do because I can't do anything more.
Yeah.
And it opens it up to them, and it opens it up to the people who only have an hour at lunchtime and they can get a ton of riding out of it. You know, it's just another bike. No one's going to force you to buy one. If you want to stick to just a human powered bike, that's cool. And I think that's the way I've always tried to look at it. It's just an option. You're like, no one's forcing you to go and buy a road bike, but you can if you want, and it's a different type of riding, it's a different experience. I think what they're doing is really cool, and how things are progressing from a tech point of view is wicked, really interesting. And it's going to be really, really cool to see where it goes. And it's great that it's bringing money into the industry that maybe we wouldn't have had before. And maybe these struggles we're going through now would have existed pre-COVID maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good, I think, to come from them and that have come out of them.
Do you test them differently? Is there a different process or anything?
I guess you do more focus on uphill.
Yeah.
Potentially, a bit like when we ride cross-country bikes, you know.
Right, okay.
When you ride cross-country bikes, you're really sort of tuned into how they behave on the climbs and all of those things. And similarly, you're thinking about how the motor works, how you work with the motor, how it feels as in natural. You know, the old test was really basic. Like, can you wheelie it without being out of control? And, you know, things have moved on loads because they feel so natural. The motors have just got more refined year after year. And you can do good wheelies on it now.
Yeah, for sure.
I've had an idea for a segment.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's called Rob Weaver's Tech Milestones.
Ooh.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do
you like that? We might have... Doug's probably going to come up with a theme tune.
Yeah.
Good work,
probably.
Doug.
And he's probably going to do an animation as well.
Yeah.
Rob Weaver's Tech Milestones.
I feel pretty bad for Doug.
Sorry.
I feel like we're throwing him under the bus a little bit.
You don't have to. But basically, we've identified in our conversation, like, e-bikes is a big tech milestone,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
And then you identified forward geometry, for instance. But you've been doing this a long time. A lot more has gone on than that. What would you say are your biggest like tech milestones in mountain biking for the last 14 years of testing?
Drop a post for sure. It has to be.
Drop a post is crazy. It's almost like we actually talked about it the other day on the podcast, didn't we? Like
about drop posts.
Yeah. We talked about like what you used to do before drop post, like life before drop post it's so insane.
Yeah.
I
It
personally,
doesn't feel like that long ago.
I was a
which is the
midway
craziest
guy.
Thing.
I was
Really?
a midway guy.
Oh, really?
Just suck up the knee pain and bucking over the bars. I was just worst of both worlds.
You don't
guy.
like change though, right?
No, I
Sorry.
don't like change. I wasn't going to mess around with those quick release.
Dude, my friend had it so dialed with the quick release. He could like
Oh,
do
just
it
do it
and
by-
sit,
Yeah.
and then so I think he'd leave it open and then be able to just pick it up with him
He
and
have a
stand
very
up.
sort of like his bum was very sort of like
It just, yeah, you know what I mean? He'd like lock it in with his cheeks.
yeah. Good dexterity. That's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to-
Dexterity,
Yeah.
yeah.
Great anal, not anal.
Whoa.
Not anal.
Butt.
Not ain't no. Yeah, butt.
Buttock.
Yeah.
Glute.
Butt
Could you say
dexterity.
Glute dexterity. He had
Yeah.
great glute dexterity.
Wow.
Glute dexterity.
What a guy.
Didn't even need a dropper.
He could just
Does
nip
he
it
sti-
and then
does
pick
he-
it back up.
Does he
The
not bother
clamper.
with one now? Is
Nah, he
is
doesn't ride anymore.
Oh, does he?
Nah.
The dropper's killed it for him.
Yeah, the dropper's killed him.
Prolapse day.
Oh my god!
He can't.
Got two
anymore.
arseholes
It's gone.
now.
It's
Okay,
gone.
right. So yeah, droppers hugely important, right?
Yeah, totally. I think I tested one in 2008.
Yeah.
I think that was the first time I rode one, a gravity
Doesn't feel
dropper.
long ago.
And then I remember I went on the launch for the Reverb.
Right.
But I mean, that was like, to be fair, that was a mess because it was when there was that massive ash cloud, volcanic ash cloud. Do you remember that from Iceland?
Yeah.
So my flight got delayed by like 8 hours. I got stuck in New York for a day.
Dude, that sounds
No.
so cool moaning about that.
Yeah.
You sounded so cool then.
For a day.
So I was stuck
Put the
in.
sunglasses on him.
I got stuck. All right, I should change it. I actually got stuck in New Jersey, and I got in at like 2 a.m. And then, so it's going back some time, and it was just like a huge bank of phones, and it was just like the hotel cards on all the phones. That like just pick it up, and you'll just get through to the hotel, whichever one you want to stay at. And I was like, oh, there's a travel lodge. You know what travel lodge is? That's fine. Call it up. And this guy's like, yeah, I'll come pick you up. There was no sweat. And there was a guy who'd flown from Bristol who'd sat next to me, and he must have been like in his 70s or 80s. And he was like, I have no idea what I'm doing, where I'm going. Can I just come and stay in the same hotel as you? And I was like, yeah, of course, no worries. So we go down, and it turns out over there it's like Travelodge is a franchise. So it was just this ropey room above an Indian restaurant. Like my bed was on concrete blocks. I was looking for like something to plug my phone in, and I was like, oh, it's just a mattress on concrete blocks. Lovely.
Whoa.
Lovely. And then the guy came knocking. He's like, I can't sleep. And I was like, let's go to a bar. So we walked down the highway to a bar, and he told me this whole life story about how he'd worked in the military, and he was based in Australia
Oh, that's cool.
for all like the nuclear testing
Sick.
when we were
That's
testing
actually
bombs.
cool.
It was really cool.
Yeah.
And then I managed to get on a flight the next day. I got out, and I think I was in Colorado for like 36 hours.
Yeah.
Completely jet lagged. Could barely
Reverb.
see.
Launch.
Up and down on the Reverb a few times.
Yeah.
Couple of shot runs and back on the plane home. But yeah, Reverb, like, yeah, drop a post for sure. The wheel size thing makes a big difference. And I think push things on. One by, big,
one. Yeah.
really big.
Yeah, one by's massive as well.
Tubeless.
Yeah, I'd say.
Quite big.
I'd say.
Yeah.
Really,
Really,
I'd say tubeless is big.
Yeah, tubeless. Yeah, yeah.
Isn't it?
One by. Sorry to go back, but basically, all we're really talking about is wider range cassettes, right?
And then the teeth pattern on the
Okay.
chainring.
Okay, so
And the mechs as well, you know, like-
they are different things, though, aren't they? Really, like thick, thin. I don't know what the
Narrow,
current
wide.
patent is. Narrow, wide.
Yeah.
Whatever it is massive, eh?
Yeah. And I think basically doing away with the front derailleur
Yeah.
Yeah.
for designers,
So that's
which meant you just had that real estate in the frame where you're just like, well, I don't need any way to anchor this stupid thing.
Yeah.
yeah for a suspension bike.
Ditch
it's a
less
mission,
stuff on
right?
the gear
Oh
as
god,
well.
yeah. You're like, bin that off.
Yeah.
You can make the pivot wider. All of a sudden, you can make a bike stiffer, stronger.
Yeah.
All of those things without adding too much weight. It was a win-win, you
Yeah.
know. And then you had massive range. Everyone were worried about it, but now, I mean, you see it in some of the big one-day classics in road. They're running one by, so it's like, well, yeah,
Yeah.
it's cool, works.
Yeah, it does. Tubeless, like you said.
And the tires in general. I think
Okay.
the tires is probably, obviously that led to the tubeless stuff, but
Yeah.
what those, I guess like Mavic maybe were the first people to create that, with their sort of solid rims, and you didn't have to tape them originally, I don't think. But the tyre tech and the better casings and all of that stuff, because we kind of either rode super lightweight flimsy tyres or downhill tyres. So super tacky ones. I remember when I was racing, it was like I had tyres for racing and tyres for riding.
Yeah.
And you just change them because you're like, I can't afford to keep
doing that. Electric gears? Are you into it or not?
It's nice to have. It's cool that it clears it all up, and if you hated cable rattle and stuff like that, it makes a big difference. And I suppose down the line we'll probably see more of it at the more affordable end.
Option,
and potentially it means, again, for designers, you're doing away with cable ports, holes in tubes that need to be strong.
Dude, again, I'm so resistant. Like, honestly, we can go through this list, and I can tell you, I thought each of these was a fad and wasn't going to stick. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But the thing is, I guess with those things, like, you wouldn't give up a dropper post, right?
No.
But
dropper post is one thing I did not think. As soon as I heard it was out, I was all in. I'll be honest.
Yeah. But you could give up electric gears and be okay.
Yeah. Disc brake, all in. I'm keen for it. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of smashing my rim, not being able to brake.
Yeah, you think from what we came from.
That's it.
And you were like, oh, what? So I can put it on and I don't need to worry about my tyres clogging up in my forks. Yeah. I'm in.
Yeah, true.
Lockout, I'm like,
yeah.
In it. But then boys are winning World Cups now. 4 out of 5 had some form of lockout.
And you look at the work, like the XC stuff, and now flight attendant stuff's on there, and everyone's using some kind of bar-mounted lock if they're not using.
And you hear about how many times Nino uses it on a lap of a World Cup cross-country track, and you're like, oh,
that's nuts.
Yeah, that's crazy. And then
Fabian
you see
with his shapeshifter when he was racing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty wild. So the tech's there, and I guess it's a little bit like the e-bike thing in a sense. It's like you can kind of buy into it, or you don't need to, but no one's going to force your hand. It exists. And it could potentially make your ride better. It might not. Not everything is there to make it better. Some stuff is going to make it easier, arguably tubeless.
Yeah. Some stuff's going to make it normal. Like it's going to become normal, like a dropper.
Yeah, totally.
Like you literally can't imagine having a bike without a dropper. Like imagine an enduro bike without a dropper post, how weird it looks.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see those slope duro builds.
Yeah.
Straight away my eyes are like, whoa, that's weird.
Yeah.
Like the seat matches the top tube and there's no, like, what is it? It doesn't even look like it's not fit for purpose anymore.
Yeah.
That bike doesn't work anymore. It's broken.
True.
So there's loads of cool stuff going on.
Yeah.
Loads of cool stuff going on.
What do you think we haven't seen yet? Is there anything that, I mean, you probably don't know because we've not seen it yet, but like, is there anything, because these things all come out of nowhere, it seems. And you're like, oh, of course, why didn't we have that before? Is there anything you think that?
So my prediction, so we have to do like predictions and stuff for the next year and whatever for work. So I said this, I think at the end of last year, we were talking, so Shimano and SRAM have automated gear changes, right? So we've already seen it on suspension. You can change the damping and it uses different sensors to kind of read terrain or help read terrain and predict what you're going to need.
Yeah.
Or react to what you need. It doesn't predict right now.
Right.
But my thinking is that, well, say, you can plot a route on your Garmin or whatever you use, and it can tell you if there's a sharp corner coming up, an arrow will flash up and say there's a sharp corner coming up. There's no reason why you can't map a trail center, and that data can exist on there. The contours can exist on there, the elevation changes. So it could potentially, there's no reason why you couldn't have that GPX file saying, well, I know you're going down this section of this Strava loop or this section of trail center, but you're going to go around a corner in a matter of seconds and there's a really steep climb. So normally now it reacts and knows you're going really fast. It's got speed sensors, cadence sensors and all that. You're not pedaling, you're going really fast. We'll drop it down and make you put it in a harder gear. But if it knows what's coming up, what's to say it can't just go, okay, well, the trail goes here, you're riding it. There's no other route. We'll just change gear and make it easier. I love the idea.
Gears, drop her up. You're just like, it's just a passenger on the bike.
It is. Brakes, what?
keep pedaling.
Just hold on. It's just like a simulator.
That wasn't the answer I was expecting you to give. But I guess that's crazy.
I mean, that's, I guess that's sort of like high-end, futuristic.
Yeah.
That's potentially where there's scope.
Yeah. You've got your Neuralink tuned into your bike.
Totally. But I think ultimately what we're seeing more than anything is the lower end getting better.
Right.
You think when we started, I would say brands maybe didn't take that end seriously, the entry level stuff, or maybe they did, they just didn't put as much resource behind it. Whereas now, there's no reason why you can't buy a good aluminium bike. You don't have to go and buy carbon. You don't have to go and buy carbon wheels. That stuff, there's loads more resource going into it.
Yeah.
The geometry is way better. Brand managers are doing a really good job of creating much more affordable bikes you can go out and have a genuine mountain bike experience on. I think it was kind of before, it's like, yeah, we've kind of got it to tick a box in the range, but our bread and butter is kind of like
the Boss Nut, when that came out, I was just like, oh my god,
right. And
that's
so
still all right. Like
Mike, the guy behind those bikes,
genius.
Mike's a dude. Like I've known Mike for a long time, and he knows his stuff, and he was just pushing those guys because it's basically just him working in this big corporation, just going, we need to use our buying power and make sure we can spec these good tires. But it's like, but you know, that puts that bike from like 450 to 500 quid, is like, it'll make a difference. And then they'll put better tires on it. So people straight away are like, oh right, I can ride over those rocks and I'm not getting a flat tire like I was before. I can buy it on a cycle to work scheme, and it makes a load of sense. And then the forks are adjustable, whereas before it was like, well, you know, all we can put on is a coil sprung fork, and it's fixed coil. You can't even change it, or you could try, but you probably won't find them anyway.
Yeah.
But you can change it, so you can improve your ride experience no end, and it hasn't got this massive tiller of a stem because the geometry doesn't require that.
True.
You can fit on it, and the bars are wider. You feel more confident when you're stood on the bike. They thought about the relationship from your hands to your feet, and it all makes way more sense. And that's really where it's key, because they're the people we need to bring in. If they're not, we'll have people have money, and we'll see the novelty in buying something like an e-bike, because it's fun and it's cool and their mates have got them. But we still need to make sure as an industry we're catering for the lower end of the market and making sure that those bikes give them a well-rounded experience when they dip their toe into mountain biking. You just have to look at hire bike fleets and stuff like that. I think you were talking about the Bike Park Wales ones, right?
Yeah.
The original bikes were like, they were okay, they kind of served a purpose, but now you're on bikes that you could go and race on. It's that's
you're getting
such a marked
experience.
difference.
Yeah, totally.
And you sit on the bus and it's such an eclectic mix of people. You have like corporate functions with people that have never really ridden mountain bikes before,
cool.
with their minds being blown. Or you have, I don't know, Dave, who's been a hardcore mountain bike fan for his whole life, and he's managed to persuade his close group of mates, and he's kitted them out in all his like leftover kit, and they're all sat on there shopping for e-bikes while they're going up the hill. They're like, this is the best thing ever. I'm just not going to tell the wife I'm spending $8,000 on a bike. But we need to make sure like the entry point and all of those, those really important things as a gateway to get into it is there. It's great having the highs,
and it's like a miserable.
Yeah, totally.
You don't want your next world champ. You don't want the next World Cup overall leader, the next Loic Bruni, to be just like priced out at the start and ends up working in a supermarket. Nothing wrong with working in a supermarket,
not at all.
but like you want it. You want to keep it going, and
totally. You want to have opportunity, like you see in is it go-karting, where they do that series where you can. Every cart is the same, and you basically buy into it. So everyone pays a fixed fee.
Yeah,
I mean, it is such a high
and they
barrier
supply
of entry,
all that
isn't
stuff.
it?
But you imagine we could do that with bikes.
great idea for downhill.
Yeah,
you imagine you do that as like a feeder series. Stuff like that. That'd be cool.
That would be cool.
But that's where I think we need to make sure it isn't just about the fancy, the bling, the automation. It isn't all about that, and I don't think it will be. But on the one hand, it's amazing, then that stuff is what helps to drive a lot of other stuff forward. On the other hand, we've got to make sure, we've got the more affordable offerings and they're not compromised.
Yeah.
That you're still going to get have a great time riding, and it won't rule out going to races if you want to, have a crack at that.
Yeah. Great.
we've got listener questions. Are you interested in doing them?
Of course, unless they're really hard.
I'm sure about
the
quantum
list
physics.
No, I think they're really good, and I think like
I messed up with that because it's not worded very good. The question I put up.
Oh, really? What was the question?
What would you ask someone who's ridden all the bikes? And I looked at some of them, and people were just like, "Are his legs hurting?" I think I
there's
word,
some good one in there.
okay,
There are some good
I
ones.
did
in
word it badly, so apologies.
Ads 0608. What's the one thing that makes a bike good, bad, or great?
Good.
Just one thing.
Tyres.
I thought you were going to say suspension. There you go.
Bad.
Mm.
Tyres.
Okay. Great.
Great. So I guess we're thinking like icing on the cake. Brakes.
Brakes.
Good
Interesting.
brakes.
Interesting.
Good brakes. So think like it's you can do small refinements to try and make the brakes that come on your bike better.
Yeah.
It isn't like a suspension fork that you can go and get tuned.
Yeah.
But if they're good, sort of fundamentally, like brakes are super important.
Yeah.
Brakes and tires, like if you can't grip or you can't slow down, you're kind of screwed. Brakes make, good brakes make fast riders faster. I'd say.
That's good. I'm going to put you on the
Solid
spot a
answer.
little bit.
Okay.
Best bike you've ever ridden?
That's actually the same as Gretzky's.
That's a listener question from Greg
Gretzky's.
Gretzky. Wayne Gretzky.
I don't know if it's like best bike. There's bikes where you have best memories.
Okay.
Maybe it's probably that.
What made you most excited to go ride, in the words of Gretzky?
Just riding. I love riding.
Which bike made you the most excited to go ride?
Which bike?
Yeah, well, I guess when you were talking about the Bondraker, that was like a big step and really different, and maybe it made you super hyped to go and...
Honestly,
try
I'm
it,
buzzing on everything.
Really, yeah.
I absolutely...
Equally.
Yeah, I'm so lucky to do what I do.
Yeah.
So if it means I'm not sat at a laptop, I don't care. I genuinely
Solid.
just want to go and ride bikes.
What's the
Solid.
split? What's the percentage of biking and being behind laptop for you?
Oh, it's way less now.
Way
So
less
probably 1 to 2 days a week riding.
Yeah.
It probably used to be more like... It's when I do Bike of the Year, it's probably like 2 to 3 days a week riding.
Right.
Solidly, at least 2, sometimes 3. But I have to try and make up the other hours because we're so diverse in what we do now. So where before it was like you could kind of get away with it. We were focused on one thing, doing a print mag. And honestly, when I started doing it, we had a much bigger team on the mag, and you'd kind of not really do a whole lot for 2 weeks, and then do a bit more on the third week, and then on the last week, like, oh God, we got to do a magazine, shit.
Yeah.
And it'd ramp up, and people would get stressed. But now the pressure's never really off. There's just deadlines constantly, so it's just kind of fitting in what you can.
Yeah.
But I ride for work 1 to 2 days a week, I'd say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is this month's mag the first cover for you?
No.
You've had a lot of covers.
I've had quite a few
Have
covers.
you? Yeah.
I think
Alright.
going back to maybe like
Millions.
04, 05.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you collect
maybe.
them still?
Yeah, to have...
So sick.
You have to.
yeah.
That's
So I think my parents ditched a ton, but I have like a massive box in the shed with a load.
Right.
Wow.
And then I think at work I have every single one that I've done.
So sick.
So like over 200 sat in there. In
Cover
the
model?
office. I wouldn't go that far. I mean, they kind of have to do it, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
That's cool.
yeah, they have their hands forced on that one. If you lurk around long enough, it ends up happening.
2-1 racing. If you could put your name to one bike in history that is the GOAT, which bike and why?
Great question.
Sun Radical Plus, because it just won everything. It was cool
sick.
as fuck.
I love it. There's just like a quick answer. That's sick.
Yeah, that's cool.
I know a load of people would say like Intense M1, and that was killer. But for me, like that was epitome of cool, and the Sun was the epitome of tech.
I think it's telling actually your answer to that question, because there is no wrong answer. Because I actually almost thought you were going to say like the Enduro, because it's almost like a
It's
bike that-
iconic. Yeah, it is. It, like kind of what they did with that bike really sort of paved the way.
Yeah, I just think it's telling because you are actually just a downhill rider. You're a downhill. You know what I mean? Like what you boil it down to is that you are.
I just love it.
Yeah,
I do genuinely love it. I love all the stuff that comes out of it. Like, I listen to all the downhill podcasts on the way here, and yeah, I can't
Wow.
get enough of it.
Is the MBUK podcast coming back?
That is the plan.
Cool.
Yeah, that is the plan.
Good.
Yeah, there's irons in the
Did you
fire.
like it?
And
Did you
there's,
like the process? Was it cool?
so, I mean, I'm fortunate I get to do the BikeRadar one as well.
Okay.
But I guess that was the first one where it's like, right, you're presenting and doing the whole thing alongside Tom. So the issue we had was the way it worked was we needed to do it in a really condensed amount of time. I know you guys record, like batch record stuff,
Yeah.
but we were doing 6 a day. which was
Ay, caramba.
so we did the whole
Imagine.
Man.
we did the whole series in 2 days.
Really?
So
Way, man.
and we got really short notice because we had to have everything aligned because it's a separate video team, and the podcast team actually works for a media, which is technically not within our business anymore. So we have to make sure everything works on the same schedule, and everyone's super busy, and we got a really, really tight notice and just saying, oh yeah, you can come in at the end of the week, but you need to do the whole lot. Like, right. So then we had a rough outline, so I'd already kind of mapped out each episode in terms of what it was, but I hadn't done any research. And it was all it was all kind of nostalgia based.
Yeah.
Because we're just kind of leaning into the fact that MBK is like, 36 now? So we wanted to kind of go back, and everyone likes, looking back and stuff. But you realise there's so much stuff you don't know. Like, so much.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously we
fine.
got absolutely hammered on the comments for
Mate,
some of
you
that
have
stuff.
to just lead into it. It's fine. You can't know everything. It's impossible.
Totally. But it was really fun, like looking back and going through all that stuff and having those chats with the guys. And
Nice.
yeah, it's really fun.
That's right,
It's
dude.
a really fun process. It's really good to do.
We sort of pride ourselves on not knowing anything, so it makes it much easier.
Yeah, just lean into it really hard.
Yeah. Just as a tip, give it a go. Give it a go,
yeah.
dude.
Just
Well,
lean in.
when you get older, you learn like you should just ask loads of questions, right?
Yeah.
You're just going to gain so much more by doing it. If you don't ask questions, you're just never going to know.
Yeah.
You might be embarrassed, but who cares?
Yeah.
So we're wrapping up. We've got 1 minute. Okay, we've got a little bit of housekeeping to do before we wrap up. We've got merch dropping really soon. Rob, we'll come back to you. Sorry. Merch dropping really soon. You're going to have to be on the mailing list, though, because they're the first people that are going to get it. Number 2, death grip screenings are happening around the UK. There is a link in the show description to find a screening near you. And lastly, thank you to Rob for being an amazing guest. We've been trying to do this for months, years probably.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you
been
for having me.
so
It's
sick. You're
such
welcome
a privilege.
anytime to come back on,
Genuinely,
mate.
I feel like you're scraping the bottom of the barrel bringing me on. but-
Absolutely not.
Whatever.
Absolutely not.
We could have gone on. I could have gone way longer.
Yeah, we'll have to do another part.
Hopefully
of
that
this.
makes
So many
sense.
questions.
Thank you, everyone. Like and subscribe. Peace and love.
Hey man, what an episode that was! You did amazing in it.
And so did you.
You shone like a star.
You shone like a moon.
I shone like a Focus spring deal.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
beautiful
good. Right, I've got a
transition.
question for you, David, to kick this final advert off.
yeah.
What would you do with up to 400 euros
Yeah.
if you got it back when buying a bike?
Ooh, I could stay in the bike shop and spend my 400 euros on accessories.
Good point. Support your local bike shop. Great point.
I could take the 400 euros and go to another shop close by, maybe buy 400 euros of pasta, maybe go to the Euro
Fuels your
store,
ride.
get 400 euros and just, that's Christmas done for eternity. Just
True.
keep handing them out every
Lottery
year.
tickets,
Yeah, beans,
tyres,
a
chamois cream,
new pet.
a new pet, perhaps a water dragon or an iguana. Lovely idea. Well, Focus are actually making that question a reality.
Nice.
Because with the Focus Spring deals, you can grab up to 400 euros back when buying a new bike. If you want to find out more, check out the terms and conditions and all of the details in the link. We're going to put that below, and I'm also going to read it out.
Please.
Okay, you ready for me to read it out?
Yes, I'm.
This is old school, innit? Reading out links.
Yeah, anticipation.
I'm going to do
time.
it anyway.
Please do
I'm
it.
doing it.
I want the deal.
ride.focus.bikes/spring deals TRC.
Ooh, nice. So that is ride.focus.bikes/spring deals TRC. And let us know in the comments what you would do with 400 euros. Best answer wins a signed ODub hat.
Oh, I like it. Good.
All
I've
right.
got hats. Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah, I'm good
Okay,
for that.
okay.
Hey, can we also put something up here that you can click on for the next episode?
How about we put a subscribe up there in the middle?
Yeah, I love
We're going to put a video we think that our lovely companionship will love
Yeah.
on your face.
Oh, my face.
Yeah.
So
And
they
on
can't
my
see me now.
Gone. And on my face, another video that we think people will love. And thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please hit like and subscribe. You guys are the best.
Peace and love.